Good afternoon. This is the July work session of the Cobb County School Board. All board members are present, so now would you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, thank you. Let's move on to public comments. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two speakers today. How much time can we allot?
Let's do 4 minutes each.
All right, our first speaker is Leroy Trey Hutchins, who will discuss updates to Pebblebrook High School advisement, and he'll be followed by Gregory George.
I don't think we're going to need 4 minutes, but but nonetheless, thank you.
Just remember that for the future, please.
Yes. Again, my name is Leroy Trey Hutchins. I currently serve as the South Cobb Council PTA president. We support and undergird the 29 local units that feed into Pebblebrook High School, South Cobb High School, Hillgrove, and McEachern High School. And we're here to just bring some updates in regards to the Pebblebrook High School advisement. So we have had a busy summer, and we want to take a moment to celebrate our progress in the direction of the Pebblebrook High School community. We began the journey back on April the 15th, 2019 with an advisement to improve our school safety and learning environment, and we are making great progress. We are excited. So we want to say thank you to our Board of Education, our Superintendent, Chris Ragsdale, his cabinet, specifically John Adams, Sherry Hill, John Floresta, Jennifer Lawson, and all of you that are working behind the scenes to ensure the success of Pebblebrook. We also want to recognize and thank our area superintendent, Mr. Wagner, and principal leader, Dr. Dana Giles, for the day-to-day support and leadership. As promised, here's an update. What you have in front of you is an itemized advisement and progress of each item. So instead of reading each of them to you, we would like to bring your attention to a few highlights. So highlights, number one, perimeter fencing is currently being addressed in a multi-phase plan. I was out at Pebblebrook today and yesterday, and there's posts going up around the area that we affectionately call the cut, and so we're excited to see that that area is being secured. The main building maintenance plan is near finalization. Lockers have been pulled out. The walls are being painted. The floors are being stripped and waxed, and so we're excited about the new improvement to the learning environment for our children. It wasn't on the original safety guidelines. However, we do want to bring your attention that alert point is currently being wired in the building as well, and it's suggested that it will be operable by the start of school, so we are definitely excited about that. The revised safety plan is in progress as a result of the things that we put in place and the alert point. The campus improvement plan is in progress, our erosion plan is in progress, and landscaping plan is in progress. And so we are excited about our ongoing collaboration, as the community, the Cobb County School District, our Board of Education, and our campus leadership. For several years now, the South Cobb community began working on several plans to change the narrative and the perceptions of the South Cobb community, to improve our community and to improve our schools. And so we began to realize it would take the collaboration and engagement from the community, our school district, and our county government. As a result, we began the task of building meaningful relationships with each of you, our elected officials, and other community leaders. Our progress is an example of that collaboration. And so again, we thank you. We thank you for appointing Dr. Dana C. Giles to lead the Pebblebrook High School community. She is a leader amongst leaders and has the foresight and vision to lead Pebblebrook High School and our community into the next season of growth, construction, and planning. Dr. G, as we call her, embodies the very mission of our community of changing the narrative, and we will continue to support and undergird her leadership. On behalf of the Pebblebrook High School School Council, our PTSA, the South Cobb Council PTSA, and all parent groups and boosters, we want to thank you again for your intentional support, guidance, and service to the Pebblebrook High School community. We look forward to your continued support and guidance. Thank you.
Our final speaker, Mr. Chair, is Gregory George, who will discuss Pebblebrook High School improvements.
Good morning. I don't have a prepared speech today, so I'm just going to kind of come off the cuff, so I'll be careful in my words. My name is Gregory George. I am a parent, a teacher, and a homeowner in the Mableton community. At the beginning of the week, I thought I'd had some talking points to come down and talk to you about, the fencing. On Monday, we walked the campus. We're like, oh, this fencing is not done by the cut. Tuesday, I come back, I see post up, and I'm walking the campus with Nick Parker, standing in the cut, talking about how the fence is going to be up before the start of the school year. I was impressed. Then I said, well, what about alert point? We don't have alert point yet. And then we walked the hallways, and sticking out the ceiling are the framework for alert point. And it just made me think that, okay, I'm not going to have anything to say when I get out here to talk to these guys. So maybe I should start with saying thank you. Thank you for a listening ear. However we got here, thank you for a listening ear. It makes me reflect on when we started this journey, our first meeting out here. I'll never forget, Mr. Scammerhorn made a comment. He said, when you come down here, you don't hear me squawking about stuff. And we just took that back to Pebblebrook and said, squawking, squawking, squawking. And now Mr. Scammerhorn has been out to the campus numerous times, and he is one of our biggest advocates. I can't thank him enough. I can't thank Jaha Howard enough from our initial meeting at Campbell, when he gave us the kind of the framework to follow and said, run off and do this and do whatever you have to do to try to grasp the attention. Sharice Davis and Brad Willer taking the time to come on campus, walk the campus with us, see what was going on. I can't thank David Morgan. He's been here forever. You already know. He's like me on campus. He doesn't get accolades. You don't get accolades for doing your job. Sherry Hill, who turned to me and said, I was appalled when she came on our campus. And I was like, appalled, really? This is such a strong word. What she has done in a short order to help clean up our campus and make it look much better, I don't have the words for that. I don't. And so, and finally, I have to say this about Nick Parker. Sometimes it's just like anything, sometimes you see people and people are in their positions and we're all just human beings. But we're walking the campus and Nick is going through the brush and I'm going through the brush. I was like, do you want to go this way to the cut? He's like, no, I want to go to through the foliage. So we're in there. And then we talk and he says he's from Texas. And I'm like, okay. I said, are you a Cowboys fan? He said, I'm a Cowboys fan. I said, I'm a Cowboys fan. And I feel like we have a bond now because we're both Cowboys fans. And so I say all that to say that sometimes it's all about relationships. I think at some point, Pebblebrook's relationship with the maybe the school board and with the community that it was broken. I think that what we're trying to do now is reestablish those relationships, and by building those relationships, we really have started something I believe that's special. I want you to know that we're not stopping with asking you to help us. We're reaching out to our community. We're trying to do community-based projects so that you can look at Pebblebrook and we can look at Pebblebrook and see something that we're all proud of. I think going forward, obviously we won't stop. Pebblebrook has needed an advocate. I think Mr. Willer and I had that discussion just before we talked. But through that advocacy and through this partnership and through understanding that we're all just human beings who are all trying to live a certain way and have a certain quality of life and a certain quality of education for our kids, I just think we don't have anything. I don't think that. I think at this point, there's nothing that can stop Pebblebrook from rising to the top. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the approval of the minutes from the June 20th, 2019 board meeting and the July 10th, 2019 first tax digest hearing. If there are no objections, okay, then they are approved. So next we come to board business, and this is my topic. As many people, well, I'll just say, some people may not realize that one of the primary responsibilities of your elected board officials is to help maintain accreditation for the school district. Advanced Ed is the largest community of education professionals in the world, and they are the ones that come in and do the accreditation on behalf of SACS for the Cobb County school system. In the next year, we're going to be accredited. This is a process that happens every 5 years. So I decided to invite Dr. Mark Elgart, the founding president and chief executive officer of Advanced Ed, to come out and do a presentation for us. He can give us an overview of how the whole system thing works. Some of us may not have been through this process before. Give us some ideas of what's going to be happening in the future. And with him, he brings his experience. He's been a mathematics and a physics teacher. He's been a middle high school administrator, a high school administrator, He has a bachelor's in mathematics from Springfield College, a master's in education from Westfield State College, and doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts. And anything else that he'd like to share with us, I'm going to give him that opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mark Elgart from Advanced Ed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, David, and thank you, members of the board and superintendent and the community for this opportunity to share with you the work that we're doing in partnership with Cobb County Schools. We've had a long-standing partnership with Cobb County. It dates at least 50 years, and Cobb County has been on the forefront of innovations in accreditation and leading the way not only in Georgia, but in this country. So this afternoon, I want to give you a little context of our organization so that you understand our work that we do, which is beyond accreditation, but how it helps inform the work that we support that you do each and every day. Today, our organization, which goes back to 1895, is over 125 years old. We serve over 40,000 public and private institutions from pre-K through 12 in 83 countries. Back in 2004, when Cobb was was the second system in the country to get district accreditation, we served about half that number of schools and districts in about half that number of countries. But through leadership, and when the schools and districts look to partner with us, they look at who is partnering with us. And we've been very proud of our association with Cobb County helping lead the way. District accreditation has become one of the most prominent protocols that is used in this country for public school systems. And Cobb County was one of the districts that led the way. In looking at the work that we do, I want to bring some context because it affects the work that you do as board members. In 2004, approximately 2004, the No Child Left Behind Act was adopted, or was implemented. It was adopted just previous to that. It really introduced for the very first time an accountability system that focused significantly on student achievement results. Overnight, the work of school boards, the work of superintendents and their districts, the focus of their communities shifted. And it may sound odd that we shifted to student achievement. We should have always been thinking about that. But that was more of the work of a principal, a teacher, a parent, and a student. It rarely found its way into boardroom discussions. And if it did, it wasn't a dominant theme. Today, it's a dominant theme. District leaders saw the work shift overnight, including the way they were evaluated. And in many systems, superintendent's contract is tied to student performance results. Cobb County became the second district in the United States to achieve district accreditation, right behind Fulton County. Because when we looked at this, we said, what can we do in response to federal legislation that is now impacting public education throughout this country in a way that our work aligns and supports the work that our school systems have to do each and every day. Thus, district accreditation was born to help districts form a system of education that supports student achievement from the early entrance, whether it's preschool or kindergarten or first grade, up all the way to graduation. And it helped your work as a governing body understand what has shifted in your role. You are a bridge between the community and the school system, but with this thrust of accountability, how does your work as board members shift in concert with the superintendent to provide the leadership to your community and the leadership to your school system? We're now under a different legislation. The Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, which was adopted a couple of years ago, and it's been slow to be implemented. Really, this is the end of the first year of implementation. The federal government stepped back. Under NCLB, they became a significant player in how states operated and how districts responded to the expectations. Today, they've returned that authority to the states. The emphasis on ESSA is on improvement. Are our schools improving? What data points are we going to look at as to whether or not they do improve? States are gradually empowering districts to take control of their own accountability and improvement systems. Some states are further along than others. California is further along, and you've got states like Nebraska, North Dakota are systematically moving in that direction. as well as other states such as Virginia, North Carolina. Georgia also provides some autonomy, and you are familiar to that, with charters and I-3 agreements where you can have an agreement with the state, but you're really assuming your own accountability and your own improvement direction. So how does a system like Cobb under this new legislation move forward to provide direction, accountability in your improvement efforts? And how do we, Advanced Ed, support that work and help you be successful in achieving your improvement objectives? So accreditation has a long history in this country, and some of you may know of it from a long time ago if you were a practitioner at any point in time. And for over a century, it was about a 10-year term accreditation which looked back at the performance of a school over a 10-year period. You were accredited based on your reputation and your performance over the previous decade. From about 1990 to 2005, it moved to a 5-year program which embedded into it the expectation that you would improve and had evidence of improvement, and you would also start to articulate what improvements you had to make in the future. It wasn't so much about what you did in the past, it was more about your capacity to achieve improvement in the future. And then district and school accreditation over the last 15 years, and now we are taking another look. And we're taking another look once again with a high-performing system like Cobb County. How can we help you move forward under the new era of ESSA? For us, when we come into a district like Cobb, the question is not, will you be accredited? The question actually is, where do you need to improve, and do you have the capacity to make those improvements? And if you don't have the capacity, what must you do in order to gain the capacity to achieve those improvements? And I led the review back in 2004. We knew coming in, and with today's access to data far greater than was in 2004, we know more about your school system without stepping foot in your school system. Our role here isn't to discover your performance on a daily basis. Our role is to help provide you leadership for where you need to improve in the future. Some of the work that we're doing today beyond accreditation, we are one of the top agencies in the country who does diagnostic reviews of low-performing schools. And we actually have a proven track record through research. The state of Kentucky leads the nation in improving low-performing schools, and we are instrumental in that work because we started off with a deep diagnostic review. We're also one of the nation's largest providers of student assessments, formative, summative, and interim assessments that local schools, districts, and states use. Recently, we merged with Measured Progress to bring that capability in. We also do a significant amount of professional services. So our work as an accreditor has actually improved because of other skills that have come into our organization. So our focus going forward, we believe, we can best help you on helping you provide effective leadership for improvement that is customized and targeted for Cobb County schools and the Cobb County community. So as we move forward, we have a body of standards that apply, and you're going to have a choice in a year, within a year. You can stay with the current protocol of district accreditation where we bring a national team in here, probably with the size of Cobb County, you're looking at 35 to 45 educators from across the country trained to come in and evaluate the school system. And we can provide you an evaluation based on these standards. Leadership, capacity, there's 11 standards, and I'm going to go into those in depth in a moment. Learning capacity or resource capacity. So one of your options will be to sustain your current program of 5-year evaluations. And we're giving you the choice as a system that is operating effectively as to how you want to move forward with your work with us. So the 3 major areas we look at is your capacity to lead. And that focuses on your capacity to demonstrate that you're improving learner and educator performance in your effort to lead. We're looking also at the effectiveness of the governing body with the superintendent to provide clear, coherent, aligned direction to the school system and community as to the focus of the school district in the future. We look at your learning capacity, your ability to provide a learning culture that students can be successful in, that teachers can be effective in. And we look at the analysis of results. Like I said today, We know more about your school system on a daily basis than we ever did before. We know what your student achievement results. We don't need you to give them to us. We can look at them every day. What we do is we look at how well are the programs and services and interventions you're providing are moving those results forward in a positive way. We look at the resources. A, do you have sufficient resources? But B, more importantly, are you using those resources effectively to improve teacher and learner outcomes? The leadership capacity one is one that brings together all of your work. And the school system, this side, your sides, the work that you do each and every day is critical. As I mentioned earlier, you're the bridge to the community and you're a bridge to the school system. You also have a responsibility to lead both. You're leading the community, as education is one of the primary functions of the community, and the community supports that through their tax dollars and other revenue streams. You're also the leader of the school system. And in that bridge, you have to have absolute clarity and cohesion into what you provide for leadership. So we established some standards. Here are 6 of them. There's a purpose statement. What is the purpose of the system? It's not a rhetorical question. What are you striving to do each and every day for teaching and learning? And what are you going to make decisions again? What we look at most importantly is how are the decisions you make as a board reflected in that purpose statement, and how does that purpose statement affect the decisions that you're making? And it's a statement that all of you are in agreement with, and you use it as a guidepost for decision making. The stakeholders, do they contribute in a way, and do you engage them in a way to further the system's purposes and achieve the desired outcomes? Your relationship with the community is critical to your success and effectiveness. Not only are they the funding source, but without their support and understanding and contributions to your improvement efforts, it will be an uphill battle. Communities and schools are in sync. When they are in sync, you see high-performing systems evolve. The third one, that you engage in a continuous improvement process. We're a firm believer, and have been for as long as I've been with the organization, 25 years, but goes beyond that. No matter how good you are today, we know you can be better tomorrow. There is no limit to what you can do as a school system. You're only limited by your own imagination and your will to change and your will to improve. Each year you should strive for a better year than the prior year. Then here's 2 standards directly calling out the governing authority, that you have policies designed to support the system's effectiveness. And those policies are constantly under review to ensure that the system operates effectiveness. And you have a code of ethics upon which you function. And I serve on boards, and I know many of you are very experienced on this board. That code of ethics is really your call to each other, your commitment to each other, and how you'll operate with each other, and how you'll engage the community and school system in providing the leadership and work that you do. The last one is that you have a supervision and evaluation process that's designed to improve professional practice and contribute to the overall growth of the school system. We look at leaders that they're implementing operational processes that will support effective teaching and learning, that there's engagement of the stakeholders to support the system's purpose, that the system provides experiences that improve leadership. I know that, the last time I was closely involved with Cobb County, you've had programs of leadership development. Those have been called out as great examples. Not only have they been effective for the school system, they've been models for other school systems. That leaders collect and analyze a range of feedback data, so you're looking at your system and you're not relying on just a single test score to determine whether or not you're improving it. You have a range of data sets that you look at in a variety of ways to ensure the system is moving in the direction you desire for it to move. And that there's a quality assurance process, that the programs and processes that you engage each and every day are achieving their intended outcomes. Your schools are focused on developing their school quality. And these 7-1 parallel the standards, but for the school, we have derived these from a number of research sources, but most importantly, we derived them from, we go into schools every year. We go into about 5,000 schools a year. And we've asked ourselves the question and researched it, what differentiates a good school from a struggling school? What do we see in our best schools? This is what we see in our best schools. there's a clear direction that the principal and his or her staff communicate and are committed to. There's a healthy culture. And one of the things that we do probably better than anybody is we evaluate the culture of an environment, and is it conducive for kids and teachers and parents to succeed in that environment. That there's high expectations, not for some kids, but for every child. There's high expectations for the adults, not just for some teachers, all teachers, principals, all parents. We look at the impact of instruction. Is instruction being delivered in a way that would optimize the opportunity for kids to learn and achieve success? We look at how the school is using its resources. You allocate through your budgeting process resources to every school. We look at how each school uses those resources to benefit teaching and learning. We look at the efficacy of engagement. We walk into schools, and one of the things that we do is we're in over 100,000 classrooms a year. We measure student engagement. We go into schools and see not necessarily how effective the teacher is in carrying out their work, but most importantly, how is the learner engaging the environment? And I walk into a classroom, and this is an example I've used recently, actually as a system that I was in the last couple of years. And a principal was interviewed when they got their results about their student engagement and said, 50% of our kids were engaged, and I think that's pretty good. And I want to walk back. I said, if you think only half your kids being engaged in a class is good, we have a longer conversation. But we measure the level of engagement in your classrooms and give that back as a source of improvement. And our high-performing schools have a lot more than 50%. Even within your schools, your principals will notice that in certain programs, there's a higher level of engagement than others. And for them to evaluate why is there a difference and what can we do to close the gap. Kids that are not engaged will not learn. It's just a direct correlation. Kids who are engaged in the learning environment, they have better odds, much better odds, that they will learn and learn effectively. We also look at the ability of your schools to actually implement improvement actions. It's great to have an improvement plan, but if it just sits on a piece of paper, it means nothing. So we actually look at, and whether that plan is a one-pager or 150 pages, and I'll get to that in a few minutes, we look at how effective are you in actually taking actions of improvement. And believe it or not, it is a differentiator. A lot of our schools that we see stagnant performance in, you can go right to this factor because they're not implementing actions to improvement. They have improvement plans. They're turning them into the district and to the state, but you go into the schools, you'll see little evidence of actual implementation of improvement actions. So before I get to the new protocol that you have, which one of the reasons I'm here today, that you have the option to pursue, I want to stop for a second and ask if there's any questions on what I've shared so far.
Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. Just a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you're looking for continuous improvement. Is that a linear curve or an exponential curve where if you're, pick a number, if your students are 90% engaged versus 50%, to get that other 10%, should it be a steeper effort to get to the ideal 100%? Or what do you look for? How do you measure that?
That's a great question, and I'm going to go deeper into it in a little bit. No, but let me answer it quickly now. It's not a straight line. In other words, you can't expect the same growth each year. It's actually, what you probably find is going to be more like this. It's going to be slow at the beginning, and once you achieve a level of efficiency and effectiveness with your change, you're going to start to see the curve you'll gain greater ground in the later years than you will in the early ones. And so that's a reality that we've seen across the board. But what happens, the expectations is the opposite. The expectations we have at the beginning is we expect growth right away. And the expectations start to wane over time, and we get impatient, and we don't see it through. So we don't achieve that last bucket because we're impatient. And that's part of the problem and part of the opportunity for you as board members When I say you provide leadership to the community, you have to have a deep understanding of what it takes to actually achieve positive change. And communities often are impatient. You tell me I'm going to improve reading, next year they want to see. You know, it was like Mississippi came out with a piece of state legislation, I think it was around 2013. They said by 2015, all third graders will be proficient in reading. At that point, they were about 31% of third graders read proficiency. And you were going to make a 70% improvement in 2 years? And it's that impatience that makes us feel as though we're not successful. So one of the pieces I'm going to end with is your ability as leaders to actually exercise patience and consistency with focused on a long-term vision. That's one of your primary roles. Keep the community focused on that long-term, that the gains will come. They're not going to be immediate. But if you stay the path and you've picked the right path, you're going to see it down the road. But great question.
All right, Mr. Banks, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a few. One of the problems we have, and I think probably a lot of schools have, is transit rates. Can you expound on how that affects your evaluation and how it affects our school system as far as being certified?
So it does affect school systems across this country. Different than the government, different than what most state governments do. We pay attention to the level of transiency you have and when we look at the results. We're not a government agency, which is, I understand how they function. They have regulatory functions, and it's about compliance. And it's about either you do or you don't. We look at that in your context. So we can walk into one school system, and because of the nature of the industries in that school system, they're looking at 40 to 50% transiency in a year. And we look at their cohort data. We want to see how the kids who are actually staying in your program are doing. And then we look at the transient data. But when you blend them together, it gives a mixed message, and it's really not clear. But oftentimes, you can see your actual teacher and leader effectiveness best in cohort groups that stay with you. So if you followed a group of kids from kindergarten through exiting in grade 5, and you saw their performance, and then you look at the transiency population, there are strategies, but all those strategies are, I will be admitted right now, I think education still has a struggle there. I don't think we know how best to deal with transiency. Public policy, though, doesn't separate it out. It just, when you get your student achievement data from the state, they don't care whether the kid's been with you 72 days or 180 days. When they take that test, every kid's treated equal. And so it is a tough thing, but for us, we look at it, and we look at the strategy used to deal with that population.
Well, in my opinion, the way what you just described, you know, is every student at that time, no matter how long they've been in the schools, whether 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, one day, it's not an honest evaluation.
Not an equitable one at all.
Well, I'll use the word honest,
That-
because the community wants honesty in our system.
Right.
Another question I've got is, we have a large number of teachers who have higher degrees other than just the bachelor's degrees. How does that affect our evaluation?
We look at it as evidence of teachers' commitment to their profession. Not only do we look at the degrees they earn, we also look at, sometimes they go after other certifications. We look at the level of professional development they have access to by the system, how those offerings are selected by the teacher, and how the system determines what offerings to make. So we look at the whole program. And we will note the number of advanced degrees that are earned by teachers. We'll look at the incentives that systems provide. There's also a correlation there between being able to retain your best. Oftentimes, teachers who go after advanced degrees and have incentives within the system oftentimes become longstanding educators in that system. And so we look at the whole context of that.
One last question. Cobb County has a very strong and dynamic STEM program. And I know that Advanced Ed has entered into this field several years ago and have developed their own certifications. How does that affect our evaluation as far as SAC's, accreditation?
It's separate than accreditation. It's a separate, in fact, we have schools that can seek STEM certification without being accredited. It's a separate program. When a system or schools desire to do them together, have the evaluation together, we have part of the team is only focused on the STEM part because it has its own principles and standards that you must meet from the accreditation. So those are independent of one another.
Okay, I do have one final question. What is our timeline as far as what Cobb County is going to be doing for the next accreditation?
I believe by this fall, you're going to have to declare which pathway you want to go, whether you want to go the traditional district model or whether you want to introduce going the new model, which I'm going to share with you in a second.
Okay, so
It's your choice.
so we will we will actually begin this year.
I believe that's correct.
Is that right?
Preparations, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Eckert.
Okay. So the new model, it's focused on leadership. And I'm going to use leadership in this environment to include all of you, the superintendent as well as the board members. It's for systems that are in good standing, which certainly Cobb County is. It's a process that will replace the 5-year on-site evaluation. And part of the justification there is, quite frankly, like I said, we know the performance of this system without stepping foot in the system. And our role when we do come in the system is to further your improvement efforts and define with clarity where we think you have other improvement efforts that you might not realize. We want to be able in this one to customize and be responsive to those improvement efforts. And you may include, if you want additional professional services, you can include that. You don't have to. You may have, for instance, we mentioned STEM. You may want to add a STEM piece to this. That's fine. It's entirely up to you to customize it. What we're doing in the SR is we see a movement which is rapidly happening across this country, which is returning the accountability and performance of local school systems to those systems and communities. Our role is to help you achieve and exceed those accountability expectations within that environment. So what we're looking at is, do you nurture and maintain a culture of improvement and innovation within your system? We would ask that the leadership in the organization produce, and we have a tool for this to happen, a vision map. And a vision map is different than a school improvement plan. And I'll be very blunt here. School improvement has become a bureaucratic, compliant process. It wasn't that way before state departments got into the game of school improvement and then the federal government. But today, it is a compliance process. There's a state, I'll use Michigan. The average school improvement plan in the state of Michigan is 152 pages long. Today, and this is a recent survey, 75% of principals believe their improvement efforts have been worthwhile in their school, but only 44% of teachers believe the same thing. Most teachers are completely ignoring the improvement plan in your schools. It's a long document that speaks nothing about their day-to-day work in the classroom with the kids that they have in their mind. It's a compliance document. And as the federal government and states continue to drive this for local schools, we don't feel that we need to layer on top of it. What you need, and what we see in high-performing systems, is what's your vision map for the future. And the vision map is actually a one-page document that you articulate, whether it's 3, 4, 5, the number of years actually doesn't matter, but collectively, this is our vision for Cobb County schools. This is our primary responsibility. These are the differentiators that we believe as a system we have that differentiate us from other systems. These are the levers that we feel are our strongest. Now, based on that, here are the critical objectives in the next whatever number of years we must achieve to advance our school system. And in order to do that, we have to have a culture of innovation and improvement to achieve that. So the leadership vision map would be developed, and you would do an annual reflection on that vision map as a board and superintendent. Where are we at this year with this vision map? What did we accomplish this year contributing to it? What should our focus be next year relative to it? This is high-level document overarching your entire system. It provides leadership to your community and your schools, and then your schools would develop their own vision maps that would align with and further the efforts and direction of the school system. We would also provide culture diagnostics. And the culture diagnostics is still under development, but it's not another survey that you do once a year. It's going to be a series of little diagnostics that get launched. You know, for instance, let's say there might be seven times in the year, and it would be automated in the system where to every principal, every school's key stakeholders, from principals to teachers to parents to kids, would respond to this culture diagnostic. And in that one moment, you would capture the sense of your culture both by individual school and school system. Over the year, we would aggregate that and give you a sense of schooling in your system. We all know that schools, their day-to-day attitudes and climates shift over the course of a year. The optimism in August is oftentimes replaced by April and May with the countdown to summer. And it's just a shift. And to be able to understand how the culture of your schools moves through the year would be helpful for you as a board, be helpful for you as a superintendent and the leaders in those schools. We would provide all of these within our current improvement platform. You would do this on an ongoing basis. We would continue, as we do today, monitoring the performance of the system. We would monitor your work here, be prepared if you ask to help you in any way, and we would go along. If something came up, a major shift, we would provide the service to support you, or if we saw things going in a negative direction, we would intervene as we do today in school systems. If there's something that causes concern for us, that the possibility you might not be meeting one of our standards, we would intervene. So that is today and has always been there, would remain. But this allows you not to spend your time, or about a year's worth of time, preparing for an on-site review for 4 days, but to instead engage in a continuous process on providing effective leadership for the school system. As I said earlier, if we come in another year, the question isn't going to be, are you reaccredited? I can answer that today. You'll be reaccredited. The question is, where must you improve? And that will be our focus. We know you meet the standards. Yeah, there could be situations where there might be moments of challenge to that. You're a dynamic system. We're not blind to the debates at this level, all the way down to the debates in a parent-teacher conference. Those are moments in time. But overall, you're one of the higher performing systems in this country, and you should be proud of it. But you can be better, and that's our role, is to help you be better. And some of the reasons, probably for all of you, you all ran because you believe you contribute for this system to be better. And you know better than anybody where improvement can happen. And just think about the story of Pebblebrook. What I heard there was problem was brought forward, the needs were identified, and eventually those needs were addressed. That's an improvement. That is making improvements in a concerted way. So one of the things that we have defined, and this actually comes from work that I did in research, is that continuous improvement isn't about a plan. It's not a document. It's actually an embedded behavior within the culture of a school. We've mistaken it for a plan that document will actually make sure we improve. It isn't. For a principal and their staff, it's about how they facilitate and carry out and support the culture of their school each and every day so that kids can find success. That's continuous improvement. And that's what makes it very hard. You can't legislate it, but I will tell you, the number one influencer on the culture of a school is a principal. The number one influencer on the culture of a school system is all of you. You provide that each and every day. As I conclude and open it up again, there's 4 levers you have at the system level and principals have at the school level to improve. The first is culture. The culture you establish at this level permeates throughout every school and throughout the entire community. You influence the culture upon which work will be done in this system. Talent. You can't do it without talent. You strive to have talent in every human resource hiring that you do, but you need a core of talent to move this system forward. Talent is different than knowledge. You can hire somebody as a principal, and they may have the talent to be a principal, but until they have the knowledge that is specific to your system, that talent can't be levered. It's both talent and knowledge. And lastly, unless you're willing to actually execute actions to improve, you won't improve. It will only be by chance and good fortune. So this goes, Randy, to your question. What does it take for this improvement to happen? And is it straight line? It's not. It's actually far more difficult than people realize, and we're starting to help school systems understand what does it take to achieve true improvement. The first level at the bottom of this pyramid is you have to engage whoever your community of stakeholders, and I could apply this to a school, I could apply it to your business, and engage them in what is it you're asking them to do differently and how frequently can they practice doing it differently. The second level of achieving that chain is how well you do that practice. The first is introducing it, and it's going to be clumsy. You know, if you had teachers doing a new reading program, the first level of engagement, don't expect proficiency. They're going to have struggles. There's going to be an implementation dip. The second level is when you start to measure how well are they doing it. Not till the third level where you start to look at metrics and look at data points to say, is that change starting to produce results? A lot of systems and schools stop right there and think they've solved it when they start to see better results. But those results, as much as you like to do this, I will tell you in reality they could even do this. There could be periods of up, it could dip a little, and then it goes back up. Because during this, you have changing kids and changing teachers and changing principals. The fourth is sustainability, where you start to see those results over time. And we really look for a minimum of 3 years, where you see that change and those results hold up over time. A lot of systems stop there. It's actually the fifth one. And this, for the superintendent and any principal, and I've been in these roles, is embeddedness. And this means that change lives beyond the leader who introduced it. That now it's owned by the teachers, the parents, the community. This is just the way we do things in Cobb County. It's not tied to Superintendent Ragsdale. That was his initiative. He's gone, thank God he's gone, we're done with that. No, it's embedded, and it's in the work. They don't even remember that he's the one that started the initiative. It's there, and it's part of the environment. That's when you achieve your true level of impact. And probably today, and I know some of you have been around quite some time, and I've been around probably too long, you've seen that in Cobb County. There's some things that were introduced. I can remember, go back when I began working with this system in 1997 or 98, that are still present today. Because they got it to the level of embeddedness, and it's just part of your culture. And you should be proud of those, and I know you are. So as we work with the school system, that's what we're trying to help you do. We're trying to help you identify what you need to do, learn to do it well, gain some results, sustain those results, and eventually achieve embeddedness. It's not easy work. It's not work that's going to be done in 1 year. And if you hear anything from me today, is you have to practice patience and focus on your future. Those are the two things that you must practice as board members, and you can provide significant value to your community and to your school system. But spend time debating what the focus needs to be. Debate it here, debate it in your committee rooms, but then come together on it and then have the patience to pursue it through to fruition. I'll stop there and open it up.
Okay. Any questions? Got Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, a couple of years ago, from the leadership of our superintendent, decided to go with IE2, which my understanding is we had to justify, actually develop a plan and accountability to the state. Contrast that to what you do versus what IE2 does. Are they compatible or are they different?
So let me use it this way. You have an agreement with the state, and the state steps back and just says, okay, you honor your agreement and you're on your own to take care of it. I think our role there is we're your transportation system to achieve it. In other words, the state's the monitor, they're the regulatory body. Our system gives you a transportation to get to what you're trying to achieve in that agreement. We don't set additional regulations, but we help you achieve what you've set out to do.
Yes, Mr. Banks. Dr. Howard?
All right, really appreciate the presentation. Just heard some themes over and over again, which is great. Culture, improvement, leadership, and it's just good to be a part of a district where those same themes are kind of echoed in our meetings, in our private sessions. And we talk a lot about just really being constructively critical of each other, right? Speaking the truth in love is a phrase that comes to mind. So we do it in love because we want to keep getting better. And it's nice to see that we have some good things going, but there's always room for improvement. And just kind of couldn't stop thinking about CTLS and how that is kind of married into everything that we're talking about today. So just I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate the leaders on this board and superintendent. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Couple of things on a couple slides back where we were talking about, one of them was cultural diagnostics. That grabbed me and pulled me in, okay? Because you could almost say there, even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've got a couple of things I want to engage you with here.
Okay.
The cultures are probably a little different in every system, be it a city or county or parish or whatever. But in order to achieve, you have to have some commonality and all that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But you have the dynamic and the challenge of how do you fairly, if adequately, if not fairly, assess the culture and what it is and how it affects where you're going, the system. Do you agree with that?
I do. In
Okay.
the context of, one of the things about culture is not comparable across
Okay.
systems. In other words, I can't compare the culture of Cobb County to the culture of Fulton County.
Correct.
But I can compare the culture of Cobb County to its vision and its expectations it has. That's where you compare it. You compare it within
Okay, there we
in that
go.
context.
That's what I'm looking for too. Because if I can bring it down to the micro, if we can move from macro to micro and without confusing too many. I've worked for principals that I'd walk through fire for. I've also worked for a couple of principals that I prayed to God, if I can say that I was the HR director. Okay, so the HR director's smiling. He probably gets requests every day. What are you going to do with my principal? You know. But without judging, there could be personality in there. So how do you weigh that? You know, in other words, I'm comfortable working with, say, a General Patton back in World War II, as long as I know they're tough, but they're fair. And they have a vision. They know the direction. You know, maybe President Ronald Reagan might be a good example. He used the term, you know, my train is going this direction at this velocity. You can either get on or get off. You know, he didn't pass judgment with the individuals that wanted to get on and get off. Do you see it kind of that way? And how do you vary that when you look at culture diagnostics?
So I'm going to have to answer this one based on my own professional experience of 40 years. And I did this as a principal, and I certainly in any environment I've been in. I see a lot of talented people in education, and I'll use education. I can use it in any industry. But working in a school or school system is often it's a matching. There's got to be a right match. I can see a principal in one setting be highly effective and in another setting be ineffective. Same person, same set of skills, same talent. And what we have got to be smarter about is and more sophisticated about making the right matches, because that's all about culture, about putting together a team that can fulfill and support the culture in which it's leading and engaging its students. And last week I was in Denver at the Education Commission of States, an organization which includes governors, state legislators, and state chiefs. And we heard a fascinating presentation by Dr. James Johnson. He's a demographer, a nationally known demographer in North Carolina State. He could paint the picture of Cobb County in the context of this country in ways that it would surprise you, and in way because you don't understand what's really changing when you're in the middle of that change. But it speaks volumes to how we must make cultural adjustments and how we staff and how we align our work to reach kids. We are quickly becoming a country where the minority population will be the majority, and we have a state like California; it's already there. It's not the color of their skin that's the issue; it's representing of different cultures, and it's part immigration, it's part just the way America is evolving. Yet our instructional strategies, Dr. Johnson went on to say, are largely the same as they were 40 years ago. We're culturally unresponsive to our students. And I see that in assessments. I mean, people ask me, why did you acquire an assessment company? Not because I believe the way we do assessments today is right. I actually think we need fundamental change, because I think our assessments have cultural biases in them that favor certain kids over other kids. And we're blind to it. We're absolutely blind to it. And I can go on that topic for a while. But in what you're saying, we need culturally responsive staffs to the students they serve. And when we do go into a school system, we look at, do your teachers and your principals reflect the community you serve? And that's really important in culture. And I can give you a lot of research where the cultural responsiveness of a school system, there are ways to manage it, and there are ways to be very effective at it.
I totally agree with you, but if I can challenge a couple of things there.
Great.
Just to get your knowledge. And you mentioned California, okay? So, or you can pick any place, Georgia and California. Our goal is, I would think, you said student achievement, so that they can actually earn a good living or excel to even past a good living, if you will, with what we give them, education, training, be it home, institutionalized or whatever. I say institutionalized meaning schools, okay? But the end result is we may be both standing in front of that senior engineer that needs a particular set of skills, but we varied those skills as they were coming up based on culture, and one or the other may not have it. So how do you do that? How do you, okay, this culture or this area learns differently than this area, but we're competing now on a global scale.
So there was and I'm going to forget the name of the math teacher, and this is very recent. This is not something nationally known, but he was in San Francisco, and he took the math curriculum, and he revamped it to meet the needs. He had a completely, almost 100% minority population. Didn't change the standards. The standards are what you expect. The curricular is how you teach. He changed the curriculum. Standards didn't change, nor did the test that the kids were expected to take, which every other kid in the state of California took. Tests stayed the same. His results went through the roof, positive. Those kids with a culturally responsive curricula were able to achieve the same as the other kids without changing expectations, without changing the test. Now he's doing the same thing in science curriculum. And there's a growing body of knowledge that if we understand the dynamics, which curricula is local. The state of Georgia sets standards and applies an assessment. Locally, Cobb County chooses how it's going to approach instruction in its classrooms. And you can do that in a way that doesn't diminish the expectations of kids, depending on what race or cultural background they come from. You can maintain high expectations. It's one of the qualities of a good school. But if you vary the curricula to be culturally responsive, kids can reach those expectations. And that's within your control. And we are examining a lot of these case studies to really help school systems understand what they can do in a positive way to overcome these hurdles. I'm a firm believer that every child can learn. They just have different hurdles upon which to learn.
May I ask, can you go back to the pyramid? Oh, thank you, that was quick. When you were describing that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, what came to mind was the book that's been out about 15 years now, Good to Great. And when you get to results, I think if, again, correct me if I'm wrong, we tend to plateau there and say, okay, we're doing good. Do you have any suggestions where you can get the faculty of a particular school or even a district as a whole, regardless of size, you know, we're pretty, around here, we've
Right.
got pretty good ones. How do you build that culture to get them as a whole to see that, hey, results are not the end. We've got to sustain it and we got to keep moving.
Great question. First off, we have rubrics which describe behavior at each of these levels that differentiate. So if you want to get to sustainability, there are certain behaviors that we should see. Secondly, you may not know, part of my long-standing relationship with Cobb County includes this very specific relationship with Walton High School. One of your top performing high schools, one of the top performing high schools in the country. And it's for that very reason. The principals there through the years have brought me in because they don't want to plateau and they don't want to just rely on their past. And usually they bring me in to push the faculty, to give them a nudge to say, listen, you're not there yet. Just because you benefit from kids coming into you well-equipped to be very successful at school doesn't mean you're adding value to them. It means you're adding value is, can you move beyond what they already come to school equipped with to do? And that ceiling is harder than bringing the kid who's raw, hasn't really had anybody leverage their innate ability to learn, and getting that kid to learn. But when a kid comes in with already the set of skills that they'll succeed no matter who's teaching them. And to my message to Walton is, where's the value add? You already are blessed with a group of kids that are going to perform well. What are you doing to make sure they perform better than well? And so, and that's part of our philosophical construct is we work with the highest performing schools in this country. We also work with the lowest performing schools. And I can make the case that oftentimes our work is more challenging with the higher performing schools because we have to break through that attitude to convince them and influence them and drive them to change.
Well, maybe I didn't, you kind of answered it for me, but yet you did. How do we put you in multiple places then, like you specifically Walton? But I would challenge other school districts that all 16 of our high schools are higher performing than most. Now, maybe, okay, I'm biased, but I think they are. But I would also say that the challenges at every high school that we have and are different in every high school. And people ask me, I'm moving to Cobb County, where should I move to? And I tell them I can't answer that because although all of our high schools are really good, expectations are different in every one of them. And I'm not going to belabor that, but you know, we talk about it. But it comes back to how do we, as a district level, get all of our teachers and our principals and the school board saying, okay, this is what we need to do, you know, to.
My opinion, and it's your choice, but my opinion. This new protocol is designed to really help with that. I think the focus in Cobb County has to be on leadership and improvement. And I think with our new protocol and with us working, I mean, this sets the whole thing, and then that rubric at the end is the driver for every school principal and for all of you to understand where are we at with, and you know, succeeding in this change. I think a focus on improvement with a compelling vision is where you focusing on standards that you already meet isn't going to create the incentives for your high-performing schools to do better. This will be responsive to your high-performing schools doing better. You don't need to prepare all the documentation for us to come in and do what we do every 5 years. You'll get a little bump out of it, but not as much. This, on a continuous basis, will help a system as good as Cobb County become better. Because improvement isn't in a once every 5 year event. It's a once every 5 minute event.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just kind of think out loud. Let's start with a kindergartner. That kindergartner is going to be in an educational environment for the next 13 to 20 years. So now, in that period of time, there's going to be a dramatic change in our needs.
Yep.
Job, AI, robotics, things we don't even know about yet are going to be present, just like the iPhone was 10, 15 years ago. How do we adjust, and maybe this has nothing to do with accreditation, but how do we adjust our thinking in the way that we need to in order to prepare the kindergarten today for what's coming 13 to 20 years from now?
Well, David, you just framed, I do a whole keynote around that very question, because I think it's one of the most challenging aspects of education, but also one of the most exciting. How do you prepare the digital student today for a job that hasn't been even created, using technologies that haven't been invented to solve problems we don't even know exist? And that is the dynamic of being an educator, that you're preparing for that uncertainty. For me, we have to ensure that upon graduation, every child is ready and prepared for their, not ours, their future. It is exciting. It's what makes one of the things that keeps me in this profession for 40 and hopefully at least another decade, is because that's why this profession is so dynamic, because we're preparing for something we don't have the answers to. That's also one of the scariest things at your level and also for a teacher. I ask teachers, when was the last time you gave an instructional lesson with a problem in it that you didn't know the solution? It's a scary proposition. I'm going to give the kids a problem and I don't know the answer. Yet, that's what we have to develop the skills in our kids, to solve problems that the answers aren't known or readily known. We have to create problem solvers for the future. There's a whole dynamic in one of the organizations that I think helps us think best about this dynamic is KnowledgeWorks. They're out of Cincinnati, Ohio. They look at trends in the present to really look at where we're mapping towards in the future, to help you understand from an educational standpoint where are all these trends headed. I mean, if you look at, I've been studying recently the video capability. The video capability we have today on our phones, based on what they predict in 5 years, the growth in that video capability will be similar to what we experienced. How many of you remember the black and white TVs in the 60s where you actually had to stand up, go over and change the channel, and there was only about 4 channels, to color TV today? Because our ability to process data in large chunks is going to exponentially grow in the next 5 years. It is going to change how we communicate to each other. What I'm leading to is one of the exercises, if you go down this road for you as a board, is actually to engage in a futures thinking workshop. I think you really need to understand the direction. And there's a lot of research out there that can be very helpful. As you frame that vision map, one of our parts of our process is we expect you or encourage you to look at future trends through reliable sources to really understand what's happening. Another thing that you would want to do, and this might go back to yours, Randy, is bring in somebody like Dr. James Johnson, who's going to tell you what's happened to your demography, what's happening to your community right now. Georgia is one of the 5 fastest growing states in this country. And it's not as much through immigration, it's migration from other states. I mean, he jokes about it. He says, New England's losing population, which originally I'm from. All he says is the last person to leave, please turn the lights out. Because it's just shedding population that's moving to North Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, and Arizona, I think. That's the other one. But at any rate, that's affecting Cobb County as one of the largest systems. And who are those families? What do you know about those families? What do you know about the families that haven't had kids yet and who's having kids? I will tell you, it's not white Caucasian families. They're not producing kids at the replacement. You need to have this sounds weird, but you need to have 2.1 kids to replace yourself. And Caucasian families are having kids at less than 2 on average. All the other populations are at replacement numbers. And so what's happening to the America we think we have? America is a melting pot. It still is. And it's continuing to melt. But what's the impact on you as leaders in this community? You've seen Cobb County. David, how long have you lived in the community?
Since 69,
Changed a little?
about 1,000 or 100,000%.
And 67. There you go. And I'm a native. I came in 95.
All right, but I got to say this. My dad taught his wife in homeroom at Thurl High School when she was in the, 8th grade? But anyway, just weird
Wow.
connection.
But at any rate, you know what I'm talking about. It's changed dramatically. And I'm an educator and a lifelong educator. I think we do a better job today than we did when I went through school. I don't buy into our schools are in decline. I actually think we do a better job. My kids, I have 4 of them, are better educated than I was. And the younger ones are going to be better educated than the older ones. But I still think we have a ways to go to have adjusted to how life has changed. From who we serve to how we serve them to where technology and the digital world, information age our kids are growing up in, how responsive. We have huge opportunities for improvement. We are doing better, but we have a steep learning curve to do even better.
One last question is, change the focus a little bit. How much of an impact does the higher education, such as universities, colleges, and technical schools, have on the public education environment?
Does anyone want to hire Ed here? We can't ignore one another. Kentucky's been very good at getting the P20 groups together. I actually, last week, Pennsylvania is another state that's really looking at its higher ed system in conjunction with its K-12 system. I don't think Georgia's done as good a job there. From looking at the programs and majors and services that higher ed provides in relation to the jobs of the future, how it aligns with the expectations we have in preparing kids for college K-12. We have a disconnected system. And there was a lot of conversation, and it was led by Governor Wolf of Pennsylvania, about how we have to do a much better job of connecting our higher ed systems into K-12. From the student perspective, also from a professional replenishment perspective. We have, there's been a 38% decline in the number of kids going into education prep programs just in the last 5 years. The teacher shortage in this country is real and getting significantly worse. And it's from rural America to urban centers to big metropolitan areas like Cobb County. It's affecting everywhere. And we're looking at higher ed, and we have nobody in teacher prep programs, or we're not the replacement we need. It's going to have a significant public policy issue, which is on the horizon. How do you deal with it? Well, part of the problem is higher ed's doing what higher ed wants to do, and K-12 are separate. This state needs a P20 aligned system, and we need to work hard at it. It just doesn't happen because people get together once or twice a year. And we're weak in that area right now. And if you knew what the higher ed was doing, it would help you do your job too.
Ms. Davis.
Mark, thank you so much. This has been a very great presentation. I wanted to know what you've seen work well in a district that actually prioritized culturally responsive teaching in terms of training, just what they did that was good for the students.
So it's actually it's a series of strategic moves. And let me go to Charlotte, North Carolina, give you an example. Part of it, I think, the first thing Charlotte did was they recognized back around 2000 that they needed to really take control of ensuring they had an effective leader in every school. They built their own leadership induction program. You know, Cobb, you've had work there. And then once they did that, then they said, now we have to do the same thing in a much grander scale at the teacher level. That they didn't depend on higher ed to prepare the teachers for those classrooms. That they said, okay, our goal is get a great principal in every school and get an effective teacher in every classroom. And they have formal programs to do both. And what it did is, because of your context is unique to you, your culture is unique to you, you're now taking ownership of preparing those principals and teachers to operate effectively in your system. If I go to the slide here about leadership levers, what I would say is Cobb focuses on getting talent. I mean, Charlotte focuses on getting talent, but then they invest in giving them the knowledge to perform well in that system. And so what I've seen systems do, and the reason I pick Charlotte is because they're large like you, is take control of teacher preparation. They actually look at higher ed as a minimum threshold, not as a, well, we're here, you got a degree from Vanderbilt, so you're going to be a great teacher. Yes, you got a degree from Vanderbilt. Now we have to train you for Cobb County. So, and the systems and individual schools that are doing the best work there take their human resources as investments and prepare them to be successful in that environment. It's a huge undertaking, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. And certainly HR can provide you with some examples there. But that sets the stage for the third one, is now you've trained and everything. As I said earlier, you're in control of your curriculum. The state sets the standards. The state has their exam. That's fine. But who's in charge of the curriculum and the programs you offer kids? And, you know, I'm a former math teacher. There are programs that actually help your math development that are not math. The two most significant programs that have math development, music, foreign language. When do you introduce foreign language in Cobb County? When can kids start taking a foreign language? What year? Middle school? Mm-hmm. High-performing systems in the world outside the United States, that starts in pre-K, kindergarten. Atlanta International School has a phenomenal reputation. It's right here in your backyard. And one of my younger kids is considering going there. Basically, any kid that goes through AIS will come out by 5th or 6th grade, bilingual if not multilingual. The correspondence is their math abilities, because there's patterns and trends and everything in sequencing. They're learning a language and learning music correspond to learning math. It's brain development. Music, foreign language, and math have similar neuron developments within your brain that reinforce one another. So when I see systems cut out music or foreign language, you're actually reducing your capability to develop math. And they double up on math when they didn't really need to. All they need to do is make sure you keep music and foreign language going. In fact, what you should do is figure out a way in 10 years how you can get foreign language in every one of your elementary schools. Start teaching kids pre-K, kindergarten. Like I said, we're in 83 countries. It's proven. We're the only developing country that doesn't start teaching a second language at kindergarten at age 5 or 6. The only developing country that doesn't do it.
Okay, Mr. Scammahorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick comment, when I was leaving, getting ready to graduate with my bachelor's degree in engineering technology, we were touring a power plant, electricity generating power plant. And quite frankly, one of my insecurities was I up to the task of getting a job like that, even in my mid to late 20s. And the senior engineer that was giving us a tour, there was several groups touring, but I happened to be with him. I asked him, I said, how do I know if I'm ready, to come to work? And he goes, well, I'm going to teach you what you need to know, but all I need to know is that you have the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. So my point being is it's not about me, but that opened my eyes to business trains their people once they know. But in education, in my opinion, without going into a lot of detail, we can't, in business, you can take employees and executives and send them off. But we have to keep our people in classrooms because somebody's got to watch them. But we don't have the budget to really have a cadre of people to go in and keep teaching on a way. Do you have an opinion of that?
Oh,
or-
I have opinions. Yes. I think you noticed that already. Teaching actually should be a full year profession, but kids should be in classrooms full year. You should not be taking teachers out of classrooms to train. That training should happen in the summertime and the off time. I really, if I were to go back into a school system, the first thing I would do is completely reevaluate how we distribute resources.
How to evaluate what? I'm sorry.
How we distribute our resources.
Okay.
I think there are returns on investments. You should do your training in the summertime, and teachers should have contracts that are longer than the school year. When kids are in, you think about it, you're going to have surgery. That doctor doesn't just practice surgery when you're on the table. They have a lot of training, a lot of time, and they're not pulled away to be trained, and they send in a substitute to do the surgery on you. We have to take the same care with our kids. I think we should minimize the disruption in their classrooms. They should have their regular teacher as often as can be, but we should invest in training them outside those times. They're not going to grow and improve just by being. They need your support, they need your guidance, they need your investment.
One last question, if I can bring this back in again for my benefit, if nobody. How do you see maybe this school board, if you want to zero in on us, or school boards, how can we change knowing what our role is and should or shouldn't be, and how do we communicate those kind of things that you've been talking about since you've been here to our public?
Great question. This is what I often give boards to evaluate whether they're moving in the right direction. If you think about your deliberations as a board, how much of your time are you spending on day-to-day operations versus how much of your time are you spending on looking at the future and providing clear direction for that future? And when you gather most of your time, an effective, highly effective board will spend most of their time on the future of your school system. You hire a staff to handle day-to-day operations. However, the political realities for many boards is it's the opposite is true. They spend way too much time on day-to-day stuff and not nearly enough time on the future of education in your community. You have the only opportunity to do that. Somebody in the community doesn't. Teachers who are in the classroom every day do not. Principals who are running their schools every day. You are in the unique position to focus most significantly on the future direction of Cobb County Schools. No one else has that opportunity. So if you don't do it, who will? So I advise boards to really look at your behaviors with each other and say, are we spending too much time on the day-to-day? We've hired a professional staff who has the expertise, experience, and training to do that. If they're not doing that, then we need to make a change, but we shouldn't do it. We're still lay people. We're not the professionals, even though some of you have education backgrounds. In this role, you're a lay person. But you are leaders of the community, and you should focus on the direction of that community in the school system for that community. That's where you can provide the best for Cobb County, is to be the leaders of the future.
Just one more of a comment. If I may say, I've been on the board now almost 7 years, and just before coming on, and since if we have been able to evolve our staff where they are looking at training. And I like the idea of training our teachers during the off time if we could find the way to do it and things like that. But we are looking, and our staff now is looking for, if a person's not a good fit at some place, where can we put him or her that's still good? So I feel like, and I hope you find that when you start evaluating us, but you say you do that continuously anyway. I hope you find that the case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scramhorn. Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, Mark, presentation. I'm going to go back a little bit and rewind for a second when you talked about comparing another district's culture to Cobb. That would be totally unfair to that district to try to compare them to our culture. So I just want to throw that out there.
Agree, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and also I want to speak to kind of the last thing you just said, because as it turns out, we are currently engaged right now in our new teacher academy that we do pay additional days on their contract to attend that. And it's not just new teachers to teaching, but new teachers to Cobb, because they do need to understand what our culture is. And one of the things that we are focusing on is how, as a new teacher to Cobb, you are going to focus on the differences in students that you have in your classroom. Because they're not all going to look the same. They're not all going to come from the same household structure. So it's important for our teachers to understand the differences in how to maintain that trajectory that is tremendous in Cobb, which is upward in movement regardless of what school we have. So I'm glad you brought those things out, but I'm also I'm glad I had the opportunity to point out, not that, the old response of, well, we're already doing that, thanks, what else, but some of the things that we are doing, we definitely need to focus on. And through this new accreditation methodology, which we all but signed up for, we think that that's going to highlight those things in leadership and the things that we are doing as a district, not just the Walton High School,
Right.
that's notified or that's recognized for its great performance, but any high school you go to in Cobb. So
Great.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Dr. Elgart, we agreed to 90 minutes, and we are just about there. I want to thank you for your time, but let me just say something just to get you to comment, and then we can close with this. One of my frustrations as a school board member, and I'm in my 5th year, is depending on which group of people I'm talking about, I can talk to people in the community, and I've been on the board for 5 years, and I've been living here since 67, but they claim to know more about what goes on in our classrooms than we do. And I don't claim to know everything because it's the people that are the staff that actually know. So I'm trying to explain what modern education looks like. I made the joke the other day, but I think it's true. There's some people that live in Cobb that still don't know that we removed chalkboards years ago, and we don't reward students by letting them go outside and beat the erasers.
That's right.
But you've got that group. And then I'll have the opportunity to speak to some of our officials at the state level, and it's like they have participated in creating regulations, this regulatory environment, and yet my reaction after some of these conversations is I just want to put on my football gear and just run block, because it's like this is a system that they don't really seem to understand how it works. And then you have your personal motivation that's on the website that I saw that I'd like to read. It says, "My motivation each and every day is driven by the possibility that my actions and contributions could positively impact the life of a child. As a parent and former teacher, I know from personal experience how in one special moment an educator can change a child for a lifetime." And that is what I would say 99.9% of the people in our classrooms are doing. And yet it just seems like, as hard as I try to be their cheerleader, it's a difficult time with all the media, with everything else going on, to try and convince people that's what's happening. Anyway, I just throw that out, let you comment and finish there. How about that?
Great. First off, don't stop what you're doing. You may feel frustrated at times, but you got to keep doing it. Secondly, what the dynamic of education, I call it the second most important profession in the world, parenting being the most important profession. But it is also the profession which all others must pass through. You want to become a doctor, a lawyer, you got to go through education. Because of that, since everybody has been through it, they think they're an expert at it. It's the one commonality we have, that everybody thinks just because I went through school, I know school. And that's when I said earlier, continue to be a bridge to your community, but not just be reacting and responsive to that community, but lead the community. Lead them because you do have knowledge they don't have. You do have understandings of the complexity of this that they will never have, and they need your leadership, and that's why you're elected into that office, and continue it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate it. All right. 10 minutes? All right, it's been suggested in my left ear that we take a 10-minute break, and that sounds like a good one to me. So if there's no objection, let's break for 10 minutes, be back here at 2:40. we're back from our break. And next we have the superintendent's report, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Going to ask Felicia Wagner to come. She's the new executive director for the Cobb Schools Foundation. She is a district employee, and as you will remember, we have had kind of a reset, if you will, on the foundation, and everyone has, I believe, I'm not jumping the gun here, but I think everyone's gotten their new appointees on the foundation board. But it's very important for us to continue to have a great understanding of exactly what the foundation is doing, and I think it's kind of perfect timing to bring Felicia up and kind of let her take us through that. So, Felicia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Superintendent. Thank you so much for inviting me up today. I've been here for almost a year, and we've been fast and furious with the reset of the Cobb Schools Foundation. I have a presentation up. So you'll see one of the first things that we started on this year was a rebrand, and we have a new logo, which is on the screen right now. And I have to say a huge thanks to the communications team under John Floresta's leadership, because they've been instrumental in helping rebrand the foundation. I kind of wanted to start with kind of what we are, and you can discern what we are not. So a Type 1 supporting organization means that through the superintendent's leadership, we are operated and supervised by the organization. And as you all are well aware of, you each have an appointee on our board, which makes up 8 of our 15 board members. So we have 7 at-large members. And then the relationship between us is that of like a parent and child, if you will. And this is all through the IRS definitions. So a Type 1 supporting organization means that our sole activities are to support CCSD. And we can also support organizations that they equally support CCSD. So we look to partner strategically, either through donors, business partnerships, and whatnot, that will ultimately advance student success. So here's the fun part of what I get to do, is we have an awesome mission statement. We have one team, one goal, student success. It's what we are committed to doing every single day. And we coalesce all of our strategies around that. But where we have the most opportunity with the community is when you start looking at your vision. And philanthropy really connects your mission to your vision. So if our mission is to ensure that every single student succeeds throughout the district, then you may have to look outside of the confines of your budget through the school system to do that. So that's where we start to partner with the community. And there's a great quote that John Wooden of UCLA, basketball coaches have the greatest quotes, but he said, "It takes time to create excellence. If everyone could do it quickly, more people would be doing it." So it's a hard achievement, but it's a really great one to, kind of go after, excellence. So what have I been doing this past year? So been coming in, building process, procedures, relationships with our board. We just invested in a CRM system so that we can track our donors and what they would like to do and interactions and whatnot. We've been rebranding and then supporting 34 of our local schools that are governed by the foundation board, if you will. And then we want to make sure that we're always adhering to our bylaws, which you guys all have been a part of that process in approving. So local school fundraising in review. So under tab 2, you have a review of kind of across the district, the fundraising activities that have been going on. So we have 34 schools that are under the Cobb Schools Foundation, but there are 15 schools that have separate 501c3s, and then we have 11 high schools that have booster clubs. So they are also technically separate 501c3s. So pulling public data and current fund balances, you can see broken down by the type of schools elementary, middle, and high school, those fund balances that are above and beyond what the school's budget would be. So this is through philanthropy and decisions at the local school level of what they've decided to support. And it ranges from STEM to after-school programs and a variety of other programs that are determined by local school leadership, whether it be philanthropic or in conjunction with the principal. So you can look through on your own. I'm not going to read through everything, but I wanted you to see kind of an overview of what potential we have in Cobb. Because at the end of the day, we know that Cobb is already a very generous community, and we can tap into it in greater ways if we have the right strategy and we have the right programs connected to their passions. So, moving on. The 2020 leadership priorities. So, the foundation board will meet for the first time with our new members that you all have recently elected. We'll meet in August 23rd at our retreat, and we're going to focus, heavily on a board strategy and operational excellence, of course, and then system alignment. So I kind of feel like I was advantageously teed up by the last speaker because he said what's important is relationships, improvement, and innovation. And that's really where we want to focus our foundation efforts going forward. So having the right team on board to create this vision for the foundation is key. And so I'm certainly appreciative of each of you and your consideration for your appointment on the board, and certainly our at-large members in supporting those strategies as well. So system alignment will be great. We'll strengthen that with the superintendent and certainly other members of the staff here and the community. And then one of the things that's really, pretty exciting is creating a philanthropic incubator. So it's kind of like problem solving. So here are opportunities within the schools that we feel could have an immediate impact on student achievement and student success, but we don't have the funding for it. So we put these packages together, we go to the community, we figure it out. And a lot of people sometimes assume that businesses want an ROI from a school system that is similar to their ROI, but it's not really always the case. They really want to know if it's worth it, if what we're doing is worth it. Will it change anything? Will it happen? Will it help directionally in the future? So it's not always about, we want 25 kids to go to this program and all 25 kids are going to be successful. And it's kind of like, the Cobb County School District is kind of a good to great model. In the book of Good to Great, you're starting with a really solid foundation. It's harder to get a 2 to go to a 7 than it is to get a 7 to go to a 10. So philanthropy kind of lives in that space, if you will. It's the gap between your mission and your vision statement. So the philanthropic incubator is probably going to be the greatest change that occurs over this next year. And then community engagement, looking for those opportunities to speak. So I'll give you an example. If you're in Rotary, if you're in a business association, if you're in Kiwanis, this is a great opportunity for you to help extend this message from the foundation. And so, when the superintendent and certainly under Dr. Daniels' leadership, when they hired me in, they were like, we want to do a reset. So that means a lot of things to different people. But Thomas Jefferson said it best: if we want to do something we've never had, we have to do something we've never done. So I kind of feel a little bit like a pioneer this next year because I feel like there are greater opportunities for us to pursue, and I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be an awesome year. Excuse me. So some of the things that are critical to philanthropy is that leadership vision, is connecting that to one body, one mind, if you will. Obviously, local schools have their own needs, But there are also things as a district that you elevate as that one body, one mind kind of approach. It may not always be a project that goes to every single school, but you can certainly leverage the programs that are needed at the schools that have those needs. And again, I mean, Dr. Elgart said it best. It's relationships, innovation, and improvement. So that's where the foundation should be in existence. So a little bit of history. So far as I can tell, we've primarily focused on after-school scholarships, senior scholarships, teacher impact grants, and specific programs that are kind of one-off. So we had anti-bullying one year. We've had different grants, around different projects over the years. But for the most part, it's been our footprint for quite some time. And then going into 2019-20 school year, well, let me back up and say 2018 and 19, some of the projects that we're able to fund is we provided almost 100 students with after-school scholarships. Having been a single mother before and knowing how challenging that can be, having that financial support to make sure that your kid is safe is huge. It means a lot more than $7, I can tell you that. That's what it costs for ASP every day is $7. And knowing that a child is not going home alone and is getting these scholarships is critical to their learning and their safety. And also in tab 3, you can look at some of the disbursements throughout the year. So it just kind of happens this way that every elementary school is almost equally represented. Every post is equally represented, and that just happened because of the need. There was no greater need necessarily in one segment of the county than others. And all of these people had financial needs that they had to apply for and certainly adhere to. It wasn't just first come, first serve. It was families who had presented needs. We have a couple of letters. I'm not going to read those from parents who said thank you, and that was powerful. I mean, it was I had to get my car fixed, and I had to decide whether or not I'm going to get my car fixed or I'm going to send my children to ASP. Those are the kind of decisions that donors are allowing to happen by supporting ASP. 54 senior scholarships were given, anywhere from $500 to $1,000, or actually it's $2,000 scholarships. And the Atlanta Braves was a huge contributor to that. Gas South, Lindsey Tippins, and Deluxe Athletics. So they kind of put the parameters around some of their scholarships. There are a couple of letters from the recipients of who was considered for scholarships, and those in your packet, but in tab 3 are represented in there. Really powerful stories. These kids, we don't know, and we never know what's going on behind closed doors, but these kids kind of poured out some of the things that they had been going through, and they had the grit to continue to have success in school, and they were essentially rewarded for that. And so it's amazing that, one, they had the vulnerability to share some of those stories of their personal success, and that we had the funding from the community available to them to recognize that. Another thing are teacher impact grants. So we had 18 teacher impact grants that we awarded, in total about $25,000 throughout the district. Those projects are listed. It's anywhere from strengthening language to STEM to character building, all sorts of really awesome projects. And then another thing, going back to the previous speaker, we got money to start a music therapy program at the Haven Academy. I know you guys have probably seen the video of the child who was on America's Got Talent, I think. He was essentially a nonverbal child with severe autism. And he was brought on stage and he started singing and playing the piano, and it was phenomenal. And so when I think of music therapy, that's what I think of, is that you just don't know what you're unlocking in students, and you don't know what you're allowing to happen through programs like that that would otherwise go completely unfunded in the community. In the column on the right, the 2019-20, the potential. So whether it's internal needs that have been kind of bubbled up, or the community, or neighbors at the pool, honestly, they're like, you guys should think about, and fill in the blank. So we've talked about summer literacy expansion, so taking children who are either coming into school for the first time, or maybe who just needed a little bit of support over the summer. Tons of STEM enhancements, working with Dr. Creel's department now on some of those opportunities. Workforce development, and we've got the Career Academy coming on. You know, I personally kind of look at education as the means to creating a strong workforce. That's how we all make amends for ourselves. And then experiential learning experience could certainly be expanded upon. We've got business communities that come to me on occasion, and they're like, oh, you guys should see our whatever, the new elevator company. I'm blanking on what it's called, but yeah, Tyson Crump. So they're going to be pouring, I mean, this is just one of those cool things. They're going to be pouring concrete for something like 57 days straight or something, like 24/7. And how cool would it be to have kids be able to be a part of that if you're in a pathway for construction? Because how many times is that going to happen in our community and on the planet? I mean, it's a really great opportunity. And then social emotional learning enhancements certainly are opportunities to help kids, whether it's again, anti-bullying grants, or a variety, sources of strength certification, and things of that nature. Adult ed has also been brought to my attention, is that there are people who, they just didn't finish school and they need to come back and they're struggling. And through past philanthropic support, we've been able to provide funding that would allow them to take the GED testing. So that costs money. Each of those modules costs money, and it's an inhibitor for people to obtain a GED. And then through Reach Georgia, we recently agreed as a school district to seek funding in the community, in the county, for up to 8 students to get, I mean, it's really incredible. It's almost an entire free ride to post-secondary. It kind of targets those first-gen post-secondary students, but it's basically we raise $5,000 for each student. The state matches it, and then a lot of post-secondary institutions will match that. So you get 5 from the school district, 5 from the state, and you can get anywhere from 5 to 10 from post-secondary. And so Ms. Lawson's group has helped kind of develop a rubric of what that might look like, of how do you pick those students, because you only get 8. And that is an allocation from the state office of how they want to appropriate those funds. So those are some potential opportunities for 19 and 20. And then I can never do a PowerPoint without babies, sweet kids, because that's why we're all here. That's why you're all sitting in your seat. That's why I love what I do, is at the end of the day is you are unlocking a brain that you have no idea what its potential is, and what they can do for the community, for their family, for education in the future is really up to us as the adults in the community, is to make sure that they have every opportunity that they deserve to be successful. So that is my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. What? Okay. Okay. I was going to say thank you for your presentation. Now, does anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Scamahorn put his hand up first. I see Ms. Davis, and then, nope, yep. You had your hand up first, Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for interrupting you. I thought you were going to let her go before we could answer some questions, and I should have known better. Thank you. Couple of quick things. I think I heard you say that you've got your board together, your board of trustees, except so you have a quorum as far as getting that done. And in coming months, you're going to set, these folks are going to set our vision for us? Because I'm not seeing a vision yet.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So that's why this year's been critical, is you've got to have the right people at the table to create the vision that we want to go after. So, you know, it's not going to be an immediate jump because we've got to bring everybody together. So much of my members, I think there are 6 new ones, we've not yet met as a team. So this next year is going to be solidifying that team, leaning in on the superintendent's leadership to provide learning opportunities for them so that, one, they understand the data of the school system and they understand the needs and certainly define the opportunities. So it's going to be a year of, you know, exploration, but also visioning alongside the leadership here.
Okay. And a few months ago, I'd heard secondhand that we were still trying to tweak our bylaws. Are those set now where they're, you know, I guess, coherent and come together so we can operate by our bylaws now?
Everything is coherent. There could be a couple of things that you guys might want to look at in the future. Right now, we're set. I mean, we need to make sure that, you know, this next year of this new team has an opportunity to operate without a lot of changes. But I think we're set.
Who do you expect to, or maybe you know the role, I don't, so I'm asking, who enforces the bylaws or supports you to enforce the bylaws? Does that come from the board or from the superintendent, or is that your purview?
It's essentially my responsibility and the president of the board's responsibility to hold the foundation board accountable. Certainly you guys are part of that policy setting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the expectation in philanthropy is that you recruit a board to manage that board.
Okay. And then I understand you have extensive experience as far as foundation work and in your background. Is that correct?
I was Director of Operations at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for 7.5 years and Executive Director at the Wellstar Foundation for 8 years, so.
Well, thank you, and I know you've been here a while, but welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
I'm personally looking for great things to happen, and I think you've set the stage where we can start moving forward in great leaps. Do you agree with that, or do you think I'm overstepping?
I'm excited about it. I mean, this is what I love about philanthropy, is that you get to dream big dreams and go after it.
Okay. And did I see where you've already started a donor list, or is that the appropriate way to put it?
Well, so a CRM is a contact relationship management system, and so we've imported the data that we have for this past year, certainly that I've been here, but I was able to go back and retrieve about 10 years of data that would reflect most of our giving. So yeah, we're definitely going to be recognizing.
And I think this is my last question. In your experience, and people have shown me some preliminary paperwork from other foundations, but in your experience, do foundations carry a balance, or in your opinion, should foundations try to zero balance each year? Or I don't know how donations come in or when they come in. Maybe it depends on the different foundations, but should foundations carry a balance for, I don't know, unexpected things or unexpected
Yeah, they should
expenses?
definitely carry a balance, not necessarily for unexpected things, but if you have certain investments or you want to pursue certain investments, you have to have that. The law requires you to, through the state of Georgia, that if you were going to pursue, say, an estate plan gift and it was going to be a multi-million-dollar gift, you would have to have certain funds in reserve or they consider your organization at risk.
Oh, say that again. I like what I heard, but I'm not sure I heard it right.
So if you pursue certain types of investments, you're required by the state of Georgia to have a reserve. I think, certainly hospitals, for example, I'm pretty sure Mr. Johnson could also speak. You have to have so many days cash on hand in order to be considered financially viable. So you don't want to carry a zero balance in philanthropy.
Okay. May pursue that later. Again, I like what I hear, but, because some of them, their philosophy is zero out at some point during the year, and that's always puzzled me.
The only reason you would ever do that is if a donor imposed that restriction on you and you were not being a good steward and you didn't spend it the way the donor said. But you would never make that agreement with a donor unless you knew that up front. So if I were going to receive a donation from Mr. Ragsdale and he said, this is supposed to go for lunch balances this school year, and I didn't use it for that school year, well, that's not prudent. That's not a prudent use of their funding, and it violates the agreement that we had. But if they said, here's a donation, go, send it to the greatest need, then it's up to the foundation board leadership to determine what that greatest need would be.
Well, I think you're doing great work, and I hope you can get the utmost cooperation from everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Scamahorn. Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Felicia, for what you're doing.
Thank you.
I know a lot of our schools have some pretty well-funded foundations, and so I think this is a way of bringing more equity to the schools. I did have a couple of questions. I wanted to know if you all provide any guidance for the foundations at the schools, just even a question like that about, zeroing out your balance, things like that. And then also how we measure our appointees, like attendance for meetings, all that kind of thing. Is there an evaluation for those people?
Sure. So with the local schools, we definitely partner with them. If they want to meet, I go out and meet with them and talk about the opportunities there are. The way that local school foundations have traditionally structured themselves, if they've created a board at the local school level. So the pros and cons to that are that some schools have greater resources and volunteers. And so if there are certain schools that don't feel like the people who are going to come in and volunteer are not going to be writing checks or just don't have the time for it, then they're limited. But under the school's foundation, I'm not necessarily limited in what I can or cannot fundraise for at this time. So I could technically raise funds for any school with certain identified needs that were ultimately prioritized through the superintendent's office. And then the second part, did that answer your first question? And the second part was the board activity. So Mr. Chastain and Mr. Wheeler previously attends each of our meetings as ex officio of the board, this board. And we record attendance each meeting. The bylaws require a 60% attendance. And the minutes and whatnot are certainly shared. Other activities that we ask is 100% giving participation. We don't necessarily set a giving threshold, but we certainly want everyone on the board to be bought into supporting it. And that's really important if we pursue funding from foundations and things like that, is you really have to have 100% participation. So the activity and the metrics used for that is kind of based on giving, getting, and attending is a huge thing.
All right, thank you. And is there still going to be a golf tournament next year?
Yep.
And so I would encourage my fellow board members, as long as we're talking about it, that you too could sponsor a hole next year during the golf tournament and help the foundation. Next is Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you. She started walking away when it was my turn. Just walked away. Just, God doggone it.
I apologize.
She thought you were doing the next item.
I did.
I looked at the agenda, I was like, I didn't know he was on the agenda. Proceed, sir.
Thank you for your presentation, Felicia. I remember we used to, when we did the scholarship, for the seniors, we used to, I think, they used to come in here and we used to recognize them. Is that included in the minutes of who the recipients are?
I have who the recipients are. My intention is that when we're going to do an annual report that recognizes this past year, and they would be listed in that. So yeah, if they've been recognized here, I can certainly make that happen in the future.
Yes, I would very much appreciate that. In addition to, I guess, appointing someone, and you mentioned earlier, any entities or groups that we might be a part of, is there anything else that a board member can do, in addition to what Mr. Chastain said, to be of, to continue to bolster the momentum that's being created? Is there anything specific that you could think of, or a litany of things that might come to mind that we can assist in doing?
Well, I mean, as we build the vision alongside the leadership here, it would be critical that you all are bought into that. The foundation board obviously will be leading that charge, but, we all need to be representative of what we want to accomplish outside of the school budget. And there are, I think, Mr. John Adams has said we have over $2 billion of recognized needs throughout the system. By and large, probably does not include programmatic enhancements that could, reduce illiteracy or reduce challenges in math or things of that nature. So when you start looking at the bottom line of student success and student achievement, what are some of those things that you could, get funding for that would bolster some of your results as a school district?
Okay. And a school not being a part, like when I look at elementary schools, there's 22 out of 67 schools have some fundraising participation. A school not being a part, is that solely attributable to, we have our own foundation, we're good, or like what? Why would a school not be a part?
The commitment, the time commitment on the parents is predominantly it. And then there are also, just financial limitations that may exist for people to contribute to those schools, who attend those schools, I should say.
Wow, okay. Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you. That concludes my questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Dr. Howard. All right, did you want to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wagner, thank you so much. I really appreciate your passion and your professionalism. It's quite contagious, and I appreciate our phone conversations and our meetings, and really looking forward to what the Foundation Board puts together with your leadership. A couple of things. One, for clarification, if for schools that do not have a foundation, and you may have one or two parents that would like to raise money but do not have the bandwidth to form a foundation, can you share with me the expectations from these 2 or 3 parents? Are they to reach out to you? Do they know to reach out to you? Like, how does that work in the as far as getting something done to raise money for a particular school?
Yeah, I would certainly say the principal and any parent, who wants to take that leadership on, absolutely. I would love to meet with them. I'd love to talk to them, because one of the things that can hinder philanthropy is feeling like you have to give $1 million to be significant, and that just simply is not the truth. any dollar amount matters and it's meaningful. And time, many times, I mean, a Volunteer of the Year event and all of the volunteerism that goes on throughout the schools is incredible. I can't put a price tag to what many parents are doing for our schools that sometimes we don't even know about. But I would absolutely love to meet with them.
Okay, so if there's no active foundation at a school level, but a group of parents want to raise money for an academic program to help some reading program for third graders, I guess the leadership should come from the principal to say, hey, you should probably reach out to Ms. Wagner. She'll help you raise the money and have somewhere to put the money. Does that make sense? Would that be accurate, I guess I should say?
Yes, and so I'll give you an example. Hayes Elementary had a foundation many years ago. They kind of disbanded, and then they had new leadership come into the school this past year. And so they invited us out to come and talk and just kind of like, how can we do this and how can we structure it? So we kind of met with them to say, well, here's what's required of you. Here's what you have to do. And here are the things that you can do. And so that's one of the things that I personally enjoy are the things that you can do because, you know, those parents have ideas of what they want and what they want for their students in order to provide for their education. And then principals also have opportunities of which they would like to, be able to either recognize their teachers who've gone above and beyond, or they want to be able to provide something for their students that they would not otherwise be able to do. And there's really nothing more compelling than those people to be able to communicate and illustrate that story, even better than I can do, but I certainly can help be a conduit for that.
Excellent. And next question, for a potential donor who's maybe listening to this, or we may interface with someone at a community event, can you walk us through the process of, hey, I want to give, this is kind of how I would like to give it, how do we make that happen? Can you walk us through that process? And I guess speaking from experience, like, is it a phone conversation with you? Can you take us from step A to money in hand of the school or student? Like, what does the process look like, just so we can paint the picture better for potential donors?
Sure. Most people give because of an experience that they've had personally, or because they trust an organization and they want to invest there. So based on that, if they come to me, then clearly they already have some kind of passion that's boiling, and we want to make sure that we connect that with the needs that are identified. Now, right now, because we don't have that, one-page vision chart, what did he call it, leadership map, I don't have that right now for the foundation. So I partner with people throughout the district specifically. So if you come to me and you say, I want to help kids at Norton Park, and we want to be able to provide, a tutor or something like that. And we look at that, we talk to the principal, we price it out, and then I come back to the donor, we meet, and we talk about it. And that's a quick cultivation process, but it's not typical. Typically, you're out, I would be out in the community, and somebody's like, oh, you work for Cobb County Schools, what do you do there? And you kind of start that whole elevator speech. And so as people learn more about who's on your board, what you're connected to vision-wise, then they will attach themselves to things that they're personally interested in. And coming from healthcare, I'll just give you an example. There's a local hospital that received, I think, a $75 million contribution because the donor had heart surgery there. It's not going to, I would be doubtful if I went into Fulton County and said, I know you've never been to Cobb County Schools, but we really want you to invest here. That might be more of a stretch. But people who've lived here, they've grown up here, they send their kids here, they're like me, they moved here to send their kids to Cobb County Schools. They are invested, and they just need that vision. They need the map.
So you would be the person that we would funnel this information too, if we come across individuals in our day-to-day. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly help triage because you certainly have local schools with their own foundations, and if those projects exist there, you would want to,
Okay.
be courteous of the other pre-existing relationships. So, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay. I guess the last thing I have is just to increase participation. I know a lot of organizations, like as a Rotarian, philanthropy is kind of pushed, every time we meet. Even as a member of other organizations, if we go to conferences, or you have pins and lanyards and all kind of things that kind of indicate who's been a giver, just to kind of build that momentum and build that culture. Is that something that has been discussed within Cobb County as far as all board members, staff, teachers, administrators? I think it would be quite powerful. Give you an example. When I paid my dues for the Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, literally the buttons are so easy to click for me to give a $50 or $100, and that's how they boost their participation rate. So when they go and talk to other folks, they say, whatever percent of our members are also donors to the foundation. Has there been conversation about that for all our employees to, at a click of a button, just a yes, to donate $50, and then it would skyrocket with the number of employees that we have. Have we had that conversation yet? And if not, when can we have that?
There is a program called Gimme 5 that has been in existence for a number of years that goes out to the staff for that. And we've definitely had those conversations about, it's called an annual fund, if you will, an alumni fund, where you go out and you ask your base to support your organization every year. We're not at the point of sophistication to have something quite that robust at this point, but it definitely would be coming online within, I would say, the structure and the idea certainly within the year.
Got it. I'll just throw it out there. I think it'll be really helpful just for the whole team, that anything that the employees do where they have to re-up or sign up, or while they're doing that, just literally 5 extra seconds of their time might be a lot more efficient and productive to get the job done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Scammahorn, I'm going to let you wind it up, please, sir.
Thank you. Couple of real quick ones. Clarification, if one of the schools do not have a foundation, but somebody wanted to donate, they could donate directly to the school foundation and designate it for that school?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question is, on one of your sheets, it says please contact, or it says contact you, and then it says Angie Reed. Is that,
So
what is her role?
She is a shared resource between myself and the compliance officer here, and she supports a lot of the foundation operations. So if you can reach me, then I probably am not doing my job well, so always get her.
Okay, well, I might differ with you there. You could be doing a lot of good things where, you can't answer your phone. So then the last question is, and we talked about this, can you carry a balance? I read an article somewhere on the internet where the 10 top universities that had endowments and foundations and all that, and Harvard's number one. I mean, they got gazillion dollars sitting somewhere. If I find out where, I'll tell you, and we'll go get a truck and go get some.
Right up there.
Can we set something up like that where there's a perpetual thing? And I don't know, maybe McEachern has something like this where the McEachern family, started that trust. But can we do something like that where, like the other universities, where you carry that balance and you invest it and it just starts having a life of its own?
Yes, yes, and yes. We can have it. We have to have a vision for it. People won't support those types of investments if they don't feel like there's going to be a return for what they're investing in. So having it defined, and I know McEachern has, I think, about $5 million in their endowment that they carry. That would spin off around $180,000 a year to go to school improvement, and defined however that endowment agreement would be. But we could certainly have something like that for sure.
Well, and Mr. Superintendent, I want to stay in my lane. I really mean that, but I would love in the next year, or maybe when you get your Board of Trustees, I'd love to see how we might be able to get that vision so that we can start doing something like that.
Sure,
So-
I'm all about it.
And last but not least, and I don't necessarily mean this in a negative way, I feel like that we've been living paycheck to paycheck with our foundation.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, you know, we're a big affluent area, and I'd like to see this thing mushroom and put your name on a plaque 50 years from now.
Not my name.
Okay,
I don't think I can give at the level that would require a sign that big.
okay,
But, you know, big, I'll say this, in philanthropy, if you don't have big ideas, you don't have big dollars. So we have to have the big ideas in order to get that level of support. And I know it exists. I've heard it. We just got to bring it all together in a leadership forum and press go. And before you conclude completely, I would like to say, one thing that you can help at the local school level is Publix charities they're very charitable. And you need to connect your Publix card, if you shop there, to your school, and you have to do it every year. But that alone gives Walton about $200,000 a year. We have other schools that are around $100,000 and less. So you can also help share that at your local schools.
wow,
As will I.
that's significant. I'd like, could you put that in an email to us, or put it on a
Absolutely.
card, or, because I'm getting to the age where I may not remember it until next month, but I'd
Yes.
love to have that. That's fantastic. That's the kind of things I want to hear. Yeah, that's
Yes.
fantastic. Okay, and thank you for your presentation again, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scamhorn. Thank you, Felicia, for all you do. And I think we could quit using the word reset and just say we're now setting out on the journey. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Chastain, for your support at the golf tournament, because he was representing Post 4, so appreciate that
That's
very
right.
much.
And sponsored hole number 4.
Absolutely.
So you could
We would have it no
pick
other way.
pick your post and sponsor a hole. And all right. Thank you.
Thank
Are
you.
you sponsoring a hole, Mr. Chair?
I did this year.
Okay, well, I heard Mr. Wheeler's going to double whatever you did.
Well, that's fantastic, and that's how it starts. That's how it starts. Okay, moving forward, Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board, agenda item number 1 is the monthly occurring item for authorization of school properties disposal per district administrative rule DO-R. Be happy to entertain any questions. That list was sent electronically. Yes.
Sorry.
Dr. Howard.
Same questions each month. Anything on that laundry list that is out of the ordinary or anything that we should be concerned about?
No.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Consent.
Without objection, consent. All right. Next.
All right, we'll ask Mr. John Adams to bring the next 3 agenda items, number 2, 3, and 4.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I apologize in advance for any strange noises you may hear. I am once again on nearly lethal doses of cold medicine. But agenda item number 2, recommendation to approve a temporary easement for Clay Harmony Leland Replacement Elementary School. Marietta Power is requesting a temporary easement at Clay Harmony Leland Elementary School to provide power to the facility. This is essentially allowing Marietta Power to do some infrastructure work so that we can power up that new facility, and this will be at no cost to the district.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Any questions? All right. Without objection, consent. All right.
And the next item, agenda item number 3, recommendation for approval to award a contract for the secondary data center. In accordance with SPLOST 5 and also as referenced in the SPLOST notebook, we are scheduled to receive a secondary data center, and you see the attached facility summary highlighted there. Award of the contract at this time will allow the project to remain on schedule with a substantial completion date of March 5th, 2020. We're recommending that you award the contract in the amount of $4.505 million you see listed there as budgeted in SPLOST 5 to Cooper and Company General Contractors, and allow the superintendent to execute the contract.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Dr. Howard?
All right, Mr. Adams, I just had a couple of questions. Can you just remind me and everyone else about the scope of the data center and the urgency.
And this is essentially a data recovery data center that will provide redundancy in worst-case scenarios for our technology that will allow us to be able to recover if the worst happened, for example, and not lose all of our data. And this is enumerated in the notebook. And it will be located next to this building. Think of it sort of as a phase 2 of the Instructional Support Center. You don't think necessarily about how important a project like this is, but we have a lot of data and it's critical, and we need to spend this money to make sure that we can not only secure it, but also recover it if the worst case happens.
Is that good?
Thinking, 10 years from now, obviously the amount of data that we will house will exponentially increase, especially with the CTLS increasing and everything that we're doing in-house and bringing more things in-house. Will this center have the capacity to kind of adapt and grow with the change?
Yeah, let me
that's
jump
ahead?
in.
Thank
So the label is correct, and Mark, jump in here if I get outside of my lane here. But the data center is not really. It's almost like a misnomer, if you will. There's a lot of things that we don't discuss publicly, as in the functionality that happens within the data center. It's not just to house the data. Obviously, there is a primary data center, and this is the secondary data center. But those data centers are interconnected. So there's a lot of fiber connectivity, obviously, between every school and the data center itself as a singular objective, if you will. So to answer your question, yes, it will have the absolute ability to be a very dynamic situation as data requirements move forward. But most importantly, it serves as a disaster recovery facility as well, so that all of our eggs are not in one basket. And that being said, again, there's a lot that we can talk about, perhaps, offline, and I can give you a whole lot more detail about what it does and how it's interconnected. But I did want to jump in there because the way it sounds, data center, it sounds like it's just, a bunch of servers holding all of our data, which is it's a lot more complex than that. So.
All right, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. One thing I noticed is the account number that's now being displayed. Can you explain what that change is and how that relates to a SPLOSH account?
Sure, and I may, depending how deep we go, defer to our CFO, Brad Johnson. But the account charge codes, you see some different account charge codes than in the recent past because we've recently converted to a new and better version of Munis. So the codes have changed. They're actually even more easy to see at a glance, self-explanatory. Instead of being a long string of numbers, they have some descriptors in them. You see data center there. A quick reference for you, you see that this one starts with S5. That's an indicator that it is budgeted in SPLOST 5. So these are essentially new and improved codes, more easy to read and interpret, that coincide with our adoption of the new and improved version of Munis. And they do, as Brad can enumerate, they do align with the state codes as well.
Okay. So now, how does this convert into what's required to be reported to the state?
So, Mr. Banks, what we did in the new financial system is the Munis financial system now has a project ledger system that's associated with it, and it's kind of like a group of sub-accounts. And if those of you who've ever seen accounting systems, this is kind of like a job costing accounting system. And so going on behind the scenes, there's project ledgers. And within each project ledger, we can track each project that's going on. And for those project ledgers, we have this specific group of accounts. But also, there's a corresponding general ledger accounts that's associated with each one of those. And each one of those are all correlated and mapped to the correct state accounts, which we report to the state every year.
Okay. Will this data center replace the building that's there now, or are we going to use that building?
We've not yet determined the utilization of 440. I will remind everyone, just for humor, I guess, for lack of a better term for it, where this data center resides currently is in the building on the floor with the crack in the floor that two people cannot stand on at the same time. In all seriousness, there is a yellow caution tape on the crack in the floor. So it's
You got a bridge on it?
yeah, we've got to get out of that facility. Now, that being said, we've not determined what the utilization of 440 will be, where we'll keep it intact to utilize it for, because there is some warehouse space in that building. But we're holding our options open for now. We've not yet determined what the final outcome will be.
Okay. Well, clear something up for me. We're not talking about the Jimco building. We're talking about 440, where our splash is located and the purchasing is located. Is that
That's correct.
That's
Yeah.
where
Yes.
the data center, the second data center will be located.
No,
not
it's
next door to us.
No, it's currently located in 440.
Oh, I
it
thought
will
it was
be-
at the warehouse.
That's the primary data center.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I know what you're
Yes.
talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
But the new, we're talking about the new data center, right?
Well,
And
it's currently in existence, but it will be housed in this new facility that's being on the agenda right now that we're talking
And
about.
that's the Jimco location.
The Jimco building will be demoed.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
That's gone.
Correct.
So it'll be a brand-new building with all the structure.
That's correct.
Enhancements and all that's needed. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Ms. Davis.
I just wanted to confirm that these are building costs. This is this amount that's on here.
Yes.
Anything else? All right, consent? Discussion, okay. Next.
Thank you, sir. And agenda item number 4, recommendation for approval to increase the number of classrooms being constructed at King Springs Elementary School. As you will recall, in May, we brought you an update to the enrollment projection study, presented that to the board, and under Mr. Ragsdale's leadership, we're doing that annually so that we continually have a rolling 5-year period of very actionable data. And we learned in that update that King Springs Elementary School, we think for the 2023-24 school year, will have approximately 1,259 students. That was more than we originally thought we would have based on the slightly older data when we brought this project to you initially a few months ago. So it's necessary at this time, we think, to construct an additional 8 classrooms to accommodate the projected enrollment, the more accurate projected enrollment at King Springs Elementary School. This is a good news story of us literally implementing the superintendent's priority to use data to make decisions, and we have more accurate, recent, actionable data, and we're using that to adjust our path along the way. So we're recommending that we add 8 additional classrooms to King Springs, and that you award the contract to Balfour Beatty Construction in the amount you see listed there, $2.108 million and some change as budgeted in SPLOST 5, and approve this increase and authorize the superintendent to execute the contract.
All right, thank you. Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Adams, I haven't had a chance to chat with you offline, so I don't want to blindside you, but I did chat with Mr. Ragsdale and a couple other people. But you said, and I'm not sure I picked up on your term, this is a good news story, because we missed 8 classrooms, and if you just kind of round that around 30 students per classroom, that's 240 students, if I remember my math off the top of my head. That's a big miss. can you help explain to me the good news story again?
Sure, and I'm going to just clarify a little bit of the math. So the initial two buildings, or the current two buildings that house these students, have 60 IUs, 1,043 students. We then brought you the replacement based on last year's update, 67 IUs, about 1,100 students. We're now recommending you add 8 to make that 75 IUs, so 1,200 to accommodate the peak enrollment, because it goes up and then is anticipated to come back down a little bit, of 1,259. So it's about 159, not over 200. But that is why we do annual updates. We're not perfect, and you have to continually do those annual updates so you get the most actionable data. It's like when I go to the doctor and they check my cholesterol every year. They have to do that to know if they keep me on cholesterol medication or not. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but it helps keep me alive. So we're going to use the most recent actionable data that we have. In general, the enrollment projection studies are pretty accurate. You may recall a couple years ago, they missed the total number of students by about, I think, 22 for the entire district. So they do an excellent job, but they're not necessarily perfect. But when we get data that requires us to adjust a decision, then I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring you that recommendation. But we're not perfect, but we can always improve and learn from our
I thought you assured me last year that y'all were perfect, so maybe I was mistaken. But now you used the number 159. So if we divide 8 into 159, that's not very many students. So what are we doing there?
So you're seeing, and I will remind the board that when we talk about IUs, in Cobb, when we say an IU, our typical classroom is about 30% larger in terms of square footage than the state minimum for that. So you're not exactly comparing apples to oranges. So just keep that in mind. We can fit 30% more kids in our classrooms than the state minimum. But you're seeing, when you do the math, it's about 17 per classroom. On a practical level, and I am not an architect, so you will rapidly exhaust my ability to tell you the architectural details, but they've done an excellent job of trying to find space in a very, very tight environment to add these 8 classrooms. If you recall, it's 3 stories, and what they've done is they've relocated a stairwell to create some space on one of the corners, and that will allow them to put 2 additional classrooms in that corner at all 3 levels, so that gives you 6 additional classrooms there. And then there had been a couple other potential spaces, one on another corner on a level, and then one kind of in the middle of the lower level that were left available for future use potentially, and we're going to be converting those. But we're doing as much as we can to maximize very, very tight space to build this for our anticipated capacity.
How do you respond? This is my last question.
Sure.
I hope. How do you respond to, it's been sort of an unwritten rule that once the board votes on a scope of a project, that's where it is?
Well, we're bringing it back to you to let you make the decision. I think that the board did something similar. It was before my time, but if I recall, in the case of Teasley, we had some data when that school was being constructed, and Mr. Ragsdale, I believe, brought that back in a similar fashion. But we do not ever want to open a school that's over capacity, and we've heard Mr. Ragsdale say that. So when we have data that shows we need to revise, especially when we're this early in the process, then we're going to bring it back to y'all and let you make the decision.
But, and you are correct with Teasley, but between Teasley and now, significant events happened that changed the kind of, again, the unwritten understanding that this board, once it voted, stays with the scope. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scamahorn. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of questions. This says 2023 and 24. Is that when we're anticipating the occupancy of the is it King Springs?
We will occupy it before then. We're looking at 2020 to occupy it, but we're looking at data that shows that for 23, 24, it'll peak at 1259, and then the most recent numbers have it going down by 28, 29 to 1213. But as we've heard many times before, you get out past about 5 years and the projections get less and less reliable regardless of who's doing them. So we like to look at that 5-year data. So we're planning for that.
Okay, now how will this affect surrounding schools as far as their enrollment? Will we need to be, what kind of adjustments are we gonna have to make?
We don't think we need to make any because this won't affect the attendance zone of King Springs. We're just going to build it a little bit bigger to accommodate the kids that we think are going to be living in that attendance zone.
Okay. Another question, in Brown Elementary in that area, do we have any projection on, will we close it or are we gonna utilize it for something else?
It's too early to tell, but we've used Brown a number of times in the past. And Mr. Morgan, I'm going to use a tired baseball analogy. Brown Elementary School, with apologies to Brown, is the 40-year-old left-handed knuckleball pitcher that'll close a game for you when you need him to. And we'd be remiss when we've used him 3 times to close key games to get rid of that pitcher. So I would recommend that we seriously consider keeping Brown because we might need it a 4th time.
If I remember correctly, Brown is taking the overflow from Smyrna Elementary, is that correct?
Not currently. That was
Used to.
currently King Springs. Previously was.
K1, I believe, is at the Brown facility. and-
Brown is being utilized to house the overflow of King Springs currently, just like we used
Okay.
it to house the overflow of Teasley during construction. So it's housing actually 2 grade levels from King Springs currently. So we're not going to say we're going to close it, we're going to get rid of it, we're going to keep it. It's still up in the air as to what we need to analyze in that area to determine the future utilization of it.
So currently, it's a very functional building.
Currently, it's absolutely required for King Springs to operate.
Okay,
Right.
thank you,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Banks. All right, Mr. Wheeler, then Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions, Mr. Adams. Does the extra classrooms addition at King Springs, will that result in an extra larger cafeteria or larger bathrooms or more bathrooms? Will that come along with this?
No, we don't think the design increase is large enough to warrant a complete redesign of the other parts of the facility. We think that those areas are sufficient to accommodate this relatively modest increase. So no, we don't think that it'll require anything beyond the additional classrooms. We think we'll be able to accommodate the bathrooms, gym, et cetera, as they're already planned.
In second, with this recent conversation about Brown, I know that this is conjecture and future, but is there a possibility that a Brown total rebuild? I don't know where that school is or much about it, but it seems like it's always being used. I mean, is it practical to what we did to Teasley and King Springs, or?
Too early to tell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Davis.
I just wanted to know if we're considering these ed planner numbers for 23 and 24 for all of the projects that are in the design phase right now.
Yes, ma'am, we are. This was the one that really jumped out at us, but we looked at all of them. And whenever we have any kind of, whether it's this year or 2 years from now, whenever we get new and better data that causes us to revisit a decision, I would much rather come to you guys and say, look, we've got some better data. We need to use that to revise our decision slightly than just adhere to old data. So to answer your question briefly, yes, it is, and we will continue to look at whatever the most recent data is to try to refine any decisions that have to be adjusted slightly.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Dr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we know, this is a big project in our backyard in Post 2. I will say that I'm really excited about the county's commitment, like our district's commitment to make decisions based off of data. That's what we said we're going to do, and that's what we're doing. Even though it's kind of hard to come back and say, hey, we kind of missed the mark a little bit with the numbers, but we're making the adjustments better now than years from now. I will say that making the adjustment on the front end really builds the confidence, that relationship between the community in the district. I think this really bolsters that relationship, as the Teasley community right down the road from King Springs was happy that an adjustment was made years ago. The King Springs family will be very happy to hear that we are accommodating for the growth, as everyone who lives in the Smyrna area can feel it. The growth is heavy and it's consistent, and it hasn't let up at all. Our roads are telling us that. So maybe our friends at the commissioner's office will learn about how we're making adjustments like they are as well. A couple of things as well. My colleagues asked some great questions, and I'm glad they did, because those are some of mine. I would like for us to reconsider the restroom conversation. That's over 160 kids at peak capacity with the same number of restrooms. I just would love for us to kind of reevaluate that. As for questions, if we had these 8 classrooms from the original, on the original approval, how much more money, I guess, did we lose by kind of not getting it the first time?
I don't know that I can answer that question. Now, to your first point, we will confirm that once again with the architects about the restrooms. But to your second question, I don't know that I can give you an exact answer to what the delta would have been had we known up front. I can't imagine it would be too large, given that it's the same company and the same architect. And to the earlier point that it was your point, that we were able to make this course correction, albeit a modest one, early enough in the process. So I can't give you an exact answer to that, but I don't think that the delta between doing it then and doing it now would be very big at all.
Okay, thank you. And I just I'm just happy that the old Brown Elementary is going strong. I mean, literally all these schools that we're talking about are within a few miles radius of one another, and it has been the overflow of everything that we've needed on the elementary level. We wish we had that at the middle school level, so we are happy to have that as an asset, and to be able to save money by not having to purchase new real estate. I don't want us to miss that as a board, that your team has been creative enough to build a significant new construction on the same real estate in a prime real estate area. We saved a lot of money with that. So I know it's not ideal, but we're making the best out of a tricky situation.
And he won't toot his own horn, so I will, but it's that gentleman right there, Mr. Ragsdale, who ultimately made those decisions repeatedly to keep Brown. So he deserves credit for that.
Well, he'll deserve a public thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Dr. Howard. Any other discussion, any other questions? All right, I'm going to guess this goes in discussion. Okay, next.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Mr. Brad Johnson to come and bring the agenda item adopting the resolution to establish the millage rate.
Good afternoon, Board. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Board, Mr. Superintendent. Agenda item number 5 is to adopt a resolution establishing the millage rate. The FY 2020 General Fund budget was approved by the Cobb County School Board in May of 2019. Included in this budget was a continuation of the same general fund millage rate as the year before at a rate of 18.9 mils. This means that from a millage rate perspective, the school board did not increase the millage tax rate, and we're proposing to keep it at the same rate. But just some comments about the millage rate. The Cobb County School District has a long history of keeping property taxes low. The following are several metrics. The Cobb County School Board of Education has kept the general fund millage rate the same at 18.9 mils since 2007. Number 2, the last change in the general fund millage rate was a millage decrease in 2007 from 19 mils to 18.9 mils. Number 3, the Cobb County Board of Education completely eliminated the debt service millage in 2007 from 0.9 mils to 0 mils. And of course, this decision resulted in the school district being completely free of long-term debt, which is a great thing for the district. Included in the 2020 budget that the board approved in May was a 5.5% digest growth estimate of net property value digest in Cobb County. I'm pleased to report today to the board that the actual property digest growth from the tax assessor was 5.44%. So we were within a fraction of a percent off in our estimate. So we're really pleased with that. That's a real pain point for me because when we approve the budget, we really don't know exactly what the digest is going to be. So we have some conservative estimates, but it's nice to be right on target. It's important to note that a completely separate entity, the Cobb County Tax Assessor, assesses property values annually in Cobb County. So if the tax assessor lowers the value of a Cobb citizen's home, the district's millage rate will be applied to a lower value, and that property owner might pay less property tax. Conversely, if the tax assessor increases the value of a Cobb County citizen's home, the district's same millage rate will be applied to a higher property value, and that property owner will pay more property tax. In either case, though, the school district millage rate is still 18.9 mils, and our general fund millage tax rate has not been increased. Georgia Law Code 48-5-32 contains a provision where the district is required to conduct 3 public hearings on the millage rate each year. The hearing schedule is as follows. We had 1 millage rate hearing on July 10th. We had 1 millage rate hearing today at 12 noon on July 18th, and we're scheduled to have our final millage rate hearing tonight here in the boardroom at 6:30. The district is scheduled to establish the general fund millage rate tonight at the 7 p.m. board voting meeting. Mr. Chair, that is my comments on the millage rate.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you have available, since the tax assessor evidently has given you the information, do you have a breakdown of where these funds or this digest is coming from, whether it's residential, commercial, or apartments, or whatever?
Actually, Mr. Banks, I do, and that's a good question. So when we say digest, I would really rather word it as the property values in Cobb County, but we call it the property value digest. And right now, as the tax assessor has computed it, it's worth over $36 billion. The digest is broken out into several categories. The first one is residential, and that's 65% of that digest figure. Commercial digest, that's 22% of that digest figure. Personal property is valued at 8% of that property digest figure. And then the other 5% that makes it 100% is scattered between public utilities, motor vehicles, mobile homes, and heavy-duty equipment. The digest has increased, and we're thankful for that. A 5.44% increase is a good increase for us. I always wish it was higher from a financial standpoint, but at least we covered what we approved in the budget.
Okay, when we approved the budget, we knew we were going to have to hire a lot of new people this year. Does anyone have a breakdown of how many teachers and non-teachers did we hire this year within that budget?
Sir, I may have to defer to our HR chief.
I do, Mr. Banks. And this data is going to be current as of about noon today. I get updates daily now. So we've hired about 600 new teachers. That number does not include about 300 re-elects, people who are working for us on a limited contract for some part of last year who have been re-elected. So if you want to use a really broad number, we're approaching 1,000 new teachers, but just realize that over 300 of those worked for us some part of last year and have been re-elected. It's good to look at those folks as a good source of candidates because you've gotten to see them for some or potentially even almost all of last year. If you want it broken down by level, it works out to almost 300 elementary school teachers, about 150, slightly less middle school teachers, and about a little bit more than 150 high school teachers. Give you some perspective, as of right now, we are 99.8% fully staffed. We will be fully staffed on the first day of school, and we're farther ahead towards being fully staffed by the first day of school than we have been in recent memory, and I would dare say towards, in comparison to other school districts. There was a recent article in the paper. One large neighboring district had 160 vacancies in a certain area, and on the same date a few weeks ago, we had 16. So we're doing a great job through the work of our principals and our HR staff of hiring a large number of people. Give you one more good news data point. In the teachers we've hired this year, we've had over 100 who have returned to Cobb after working elsewhere. So we have folks coming home to Cobb, which is always good to see.
Do we have a number on the non-teacher positions that we've filled?
Yes, sir. It's approaching 1,000 as well for all the other non-teacher classified positions combined.
So we're talking close to a 10% change in our replenishment in our employment.
It's about that number. Depending on how you count the limited contract re-electronauts, probably a little bit less than that if you count those as people who are already employed by us. I will remind the board that according to the latest state data, Cobb has the lowest turnover of any of the big 6 districts. So we're doing an excellent job of retaining our people. So just keep that in mind as well.
Okay, now I'll direct this to Mr. Johnson. I assume that all these new hires are within the limitations of the budget we've already approved.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick question that occurred to me earlier today. On our senior living villages, I understand they purchase, where they live, but they're all like apartments or condos or, connected to each other. Does a corporation own the ground, or does the individual that owns that apartment area or duplex, do they own the ground and their portion of the building?
I would have to research that, I think. If a senior lives there, that's one thing. If a corporation owns it, that's another thing. I'd have to research that.
I'm asking the question correctly, aren't I?
Yeah, I think so.
It's kind of like if you owned an apartment in a high-rise building, you own that piece of that high-rise, but you don't own the rest of the building or the ground that it sits on. Unless there's an objection, I would love for us to get that answer.
Okay, well, Mr. Wheeler has some ideas. I think basically you're talking about whether something is a condominium or it's owned fee simple. But a lot like the ranch condos, you own what's inside, and then you share cost of common area. But Mr. Wheeler, you've got something to say.
Yeah, and I'm talking in general now, not just one specific area, but generally in Cobb County.
In general, you talking about the RSLs that are all over the place? I believe they all have different, they're not all the same. It depends on the individual place. Some may be the same. This one may be different than the other one. Depends on their agreement.
Are you saying some of them don't own the ground and some do?
They're not all, what I'm saying is they're not all the same. You can't just say they're all like this and they are, because they're not. It depends on their charter, whatever you call it.
Okay. Yeah, that's really why I'm asking. Unless there's an objection, I would really like to get a comprehensive answer. But, okay. Can you, 10 minutes, would that be? No, I'm just kidding. So,
No, we'll have to call the tax assessor and just
yeah,
fill them
between
out.
now and maybe next month's meeting or whatever.
Thank you.
That's fine. Share, I assume you'll share it with the board and whatever. Whatever's
Absolutely.
appropriate. Thank you. I'd like a comprehensive answer to how we do all of them or part of them and why not all of them and all that.
Actually, I'll go over there and meet with them.
Pardon?
I'll go over there and meet with them, and I'll find out.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, really appreciate the presentation once again. I'm really excited to hear about 5.44 increase in property values in Cobb. That's pretty amazing. As we know, public perception is important to make sure that with our relationship with the public and relationship with the county. Just for a ballpark, if the millage rates were to decrease, say like 0.1 mils, like ballpark wise, what are we talking about with our budget? Just looking at toward the future, because if our overall digests are increasing and it seems like it's going that way, maybe I just want to just consider what would that look like at a ballpark for about a 0.1.
Well, the value of 1 mil is $26 million. The value of 1/10 of a mil would be $2.6 million.
Okay. I just meant you were mentioning in your recent history of our millage rate that we as a district we kind of decreased the millage rate from 19 mils to 18.9, and I just think with the county doing better, I think it would be good to at least explore what it would look like to have a very small adjustment over time. I know we're not talking about that right now, but I was really interested in that.
I would always caution the board against ever entertaining reducing the millage rate, because the challenge with that is that it's kind of a misleading topic when it's being covered, because they want to make it sound like, that we're raising taxes. Yes, we are getting more tax revenue with the same millage rate. However, what that allows us to do is cover things like inflation. And you got to remember that in our budget, we have utilities, we have fuel costs that are fluctuating. They're very dynamic. And I know other districts have entertained, and perhaps some have even lowered the millage rate. That's one of those things where it sounds good, feels good for about 10 seconds, and then you quickly realize how painful it would be that next year if it turns and we have to say, well, we need to raise the millage rate. Because what that allows us to do, even if we're not utilizing 100% of what the digest growth brings in, that goes into our fund balance. And then that fund balance is able to keep us afloat on rainy days. One of the accolades I've always bragged about this board, and I know the board members have changed even when it first started, but to be able to have maintained an 18.9 millage rate through the economic downturn is just simply amazing, because it would have been a blink of an eye and nobody would have even second guessed anything ever about raising it to 20 mils, because there was a time, and granted we suffered because of it, but we were having to come up with 10 and 11 percentage point drops in the digest, and that was really painful. Everybody that's been here for a minute can recall when we had to cut 600 teachers or 800 teachers and we hired 600 of them back. That was just a total nightmare. So I would always hazard and caution, the discussion. I totally understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, we have so many things in the budget, and it's not, every time we come up with a budget year, it's, there's always somebody out there saying, well, you need to live within your means. And I will also remind all of those people that this district is the lowest central office administration costed district. And that's very important. It's a very important bragging point that we have, and we should scream it from the mountaintops. But I appreciate the idea, but I would always caution against entertaining a drop in the millage rate or a reduction in the millage rate for those dynamic costs that are within the budget. Now, I don't know, Brad, if you want to add anything that I've missed, because that's certainly more your lane than mine.
Well, just from a pure financial perspective, the revenue streams that we have are state revenue, QBE revenue, and you've heard me talk about that, and also property taxes. And so state revenue covers a portion of costs, but we pay a lot more to our teachers than the state revenue. So, and we have increasing costs every year. So we have salary step increases every year on the salary schedules. We have student growth. We have to pay the portion of the state growth that they're not going to pay. There's utilities, there's all types of things. And so from a pure financial perspective, if we want to maintain those certain things, we have to have some type of increasing revenue stream, and this is one of the few streams that we have.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I appreciate both of you sharing that because, as you know, we're all trying to do better at listening to our constituents and our communities, and just having this dialogue out in public helps so that we can all be on the same page. You know, when you hear a dollar amount, it sounds great until you start counting up all the other things going on. And of course, when something happens, they'll say, why weren't you ready? Why weren't you prepared? So this is really a conversation about stewardship, and it's good to start and end the conversation by telling the truth and that we've been a good steward over taxpayer money. And so I appreciate both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me add on another phase. We all heard Dr. Elgart talk about teacher shortage in the future. Well, unless we have money to hire qualified teachers in the future, we're going to have more money. So as we grow, not only in the digest, but in the population, hopefully one day we'll peak out in our population. Our growth won't be so dynamic and have such an impact on us financially. But always keep in mind that the cost of doing business is not going down. It's going to continue to go up. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
To tack on to that, Mr. Banks, the future is here. It's now, because the teacher shortage is today. While we may be 99.8% fully staffed, that is because and I was joking a little bit with Dr. Elgard about our culture and it being unfair to compare other districts to us. But in all seriousness, it's not just the money that attracts, it's the culture. Now, I will tell you that in most audiences of teachers, including the new teacher the new teacher welcome I spoke at yesterday, whatever day it was, whatever today is. Okay, yeah, thank you. And I'll remind everybody just to make sure you come to work tomorrow because we're on 5-day work week. That's really for me, so I don't forget. But in all seriousness, it brought about an ovation from the new teachers, okay, because it would be real easy for new teachers to think, oh, well, that's just everybody that's coming in getting that raise. You know, I've kind of come in on the tail end of it, but they were just as excited about Cobb County School District giving the largest raise in the history of the school district than anybody else was. So, and rightfully so, because the reality is yes, they're coming in new, which probably means they're going to get a much bigger raise than people that were already here because they're coming from other districts that don't value their employees as much as we do and result in lower pay. So, but in all seriousness, they're coming into a salary scale where that raise has been applied across the salary scale. So that 8% raise is going to be applied to each step. So they're right to be excited because they're coming into an organization that does value our employees as it starts with us as the one team. And you guys have proven the budget with those raises in there is just as it's the most important first step for us to be able to apply those to the employees. So the employees definitely recognize it. But in fact, the future is here with teacher shortages. And I will definitely, this is totally unrelated to what we're talking about, but I will definitely agree with him in, we've not done a good job as a state in looking at K-12 and higher ed. Because higher ed impacts K-12 in that they produce teachers. And so when you don't have enough people interested in getting into that teacher education tract to come into K-12, that's a challenge. And it's becoming even a bigger challenge for the new teacher academy that we're putting on because yes, it's beneficial to Dr. Elgart's comments about making sure that we're educating our new employees in the culture of what Cobb County School District is. But at the same time, it's disappointing that we're having to spend so much time and effort in making sure that when we hire a math teacher, that they're going to be a good math teacher. To our level of expectations, because as I spoke at leadership kickoff last week, I think, right? So, well, yeah, I've been asleep twice since then. So, you know, it's so important to realize that we didn't pick the goal of student success because it was easy. We didn't pick it because it was low-hanging fruit. Our one team, one goal student success mission statement is based on high expectations. And so, yes, we do try to pay our employees more than any other school district. But at the same time, I have higher expectations than I think most other school districts have as well. So it's a two-way street. You know, we pay our employees because we believe that they're the best employees. But to Dr. Elgart's point again, we got to make sure that the perfect employee is in the perfect seat in the organization. And that's just as important as paying the employee. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But yeah, the teacher shortage is here right now today. So it's imperative for us too, as we look at things like the Career Academy, is to make sure that we're looking to students to say, hey, as a matter of fact, when I speak to the high school classes that I do, I ask them a real easy question to start out with. Who in here, after you get into the world of work, wants to be a millionaire? All the hands go up. Well, who of you think that you can go into education and become a millionaire? Not a single hand goes up. So that allows me to go into the recruit methodology to explain teacher retirement system, how awesome it is, and how many millions of dollars you would have to save in a 401k to equate that. And their eyes light up. So there is an opportunity for us to encourage our students to look to education to go into as a career and as a very lucrative career. Granted, you don't make a lot of money up front; it's on the back end. But that back end reward, if you will, is very significant.
It was also interesting when I talked to some of these new hires that how many of them actually were Cobb County students. So we're getting a lot of Cobb County former students coming into our education system. So we're doing a good job.
All right, anyone else? All right, discussion agenda or consent? Discussion, okay. All righty, let me put that down here. Okay, so now this brings us to board, whoops, I'm wrong place. There we go. So now we have to approve the agenda if there's no objection. All right, and well, don't need to vote. No objection. All right, there we go. So that's approved. So now I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel, legal, and land. Do I have a motion? Dr. Howard, motion. Second from Mr. Wheeler. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. That's 7-0. Any opposed? Of course not. So we are adjourned. We will have at 6:30. We will have our third Tax Digest public hearing. And then we will reconvene for our voting session at 7 p.m. this evening.